Chapter 3805, Stingy Shop 3. While Feng Wu was hesitating, Huyan Yichen wouldn't let go of her. You don't have the divine phoenix blood. Just give me a bowl, will you? Please. Feng Wu, who was several years younger than Huyan Yichen, said coldly, no. Tihis. Huyan Yichen glanced at Feng Wu. It's just a little blood. Don't be so pretentious. Feng Wu said, try take it from me. I dare you. Huyan Yichen said, I would never do such a thing. He stormed off after that. Before Huyan Yichen left, Feng Wu asked, can you sell me the fake iron in this corner? Huyan Yichen waved his hand. Take them all. After that, he was out of sight. Hearing Huyan Yichen's words, Feng Wu went straight to the pile of iron. She crouched down and studied the iron. Every now and then, she would pick up a piece, examine it carefully in the sunlight, and smile a little as if she was looking for a bargain. Huyan Yichen went out, but the old man didn't. Seeing Feng Wu's reaction, he frowned and was curious. Kiddo, what are you doing? He couldn't help but ask. Staring at the iron, Feng Wu said in a serious tone, one of them is real and can be used to forge an arm of discipline. Old Huyan almost burst out laughing. He didn't think much of it, but the girl was so good at bragging. Seeing that Feng Wu was going to elaborate, old Huyan waved her off. Go back to what you were doing. I'm off to work. After that, he walked up to his workshop and started forging. Feng Wu had noticed the weapon he was forging. It was a flaming spear made from semi-divine materials, but it was only a weapon of the saint level. What a pity, thought Feng Wu. Feng Wu thought, if I have it, I'll have a 90% chance of refining a semi-divine weapon. Seeing that was sighing, old Huyan gave her a suspicious look. As he pounded the refined iron, he asked Feng Wu, Kiddo, why are you sighing? Feng Wu was worried that Huyan would destroy the weapon, so she said, if you can plant an explosive flame on it, it'll become a semi-divine weapon. Huyan glanced at Feng Wu and shook his head. What do you know? Don't make me laugh. Old Huyan pursed his lips. How are you going to inject that flame? It's impossible. Feng Wu said, shall I give it a go? Old Huyan turned her down. You know nothing. You can't even pick up this hammer. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Feng Wu looked at him. Are you sure? Old Huyan shook his head. Feng Wu said, your flaming spear is made from very rare materials. If you don't try it now, you won't have a chance to change it after you make it into a sacred weapon. Why, little girl, you know that the flaming spear is a sacred level weapon. Old Huyan couldn't help but give her another look. Before Feng Wu could say anything, a voice came from outside. She can't tell a saint from sacred weapons. Grandpa, I told her that you've made Gui Tsulai's sword, and it's a saint-level one. That's why she thinks that you can make a saint-level one every time. Chapter 3806, Stingy Shop 4. Old Huyan guffawed. This girl was so... He almost believed her. Feng Wu was speechless. She was really good at refining weapons. Although she didn't have many opportunities to do it herself, she had a solid theoretical base. Since that was the case, Feng Wu didn't try to retort. She shrugged and said, as long as you don't regret it. Huyan Yichen chuckled. You're so funny. You sound like an adult. Feng Wu shrugged. Well, I've finally found some blood. I don't need to beg you anymore. Huyan Yichen made a face at Feng Wu. Feng Wu ignored him. Both Huyan Yichen and the old man were busy with their own tasks. One was a semi-saint level fork. The other one was a saint level flaming spear. Feng Wu looked at the piece of junk in the corner again. Huyan Yichen glanced at Feng Wu. You like it that much? If that's the case, why don't you play with it? Feng Wu said, isn't it your reminder? Are you sure you don't want it? Blue veins popped on Huyan Yichen's forehead, and he snorted. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Feng Wu chuckled. Since Huyan Yichen didn't take up the work table, Feng Wu picked up the 3 pieces and started working on them in the stove. Seeing the serious look on her face, Huyan Yichen could only shake his head with a wry smile. Refining weapons was a subject that depended on one's talent as well as qualifications. The girl didn't seem to have any talent or qualifications, but Huyen Yichen decided that he would let her do whatever she wanted and treat her as if she were playing with mud. Feng Wu didn't want to expose her spiritual essence before she met her senior brother Huyen. However, she needed to use the arm of discipline now to protect herself. Huyen Yichen, who was gloating over the semi-saint weapon he had just made, darted a glance at Feng Wu before showing off in front of the old man. Grandpa, what do you think of my ultimate yang fork? Old Huyen gave him an appreciative look. His grandson was already able to forge a semi-saint level weapon at such a young age. With his capability, he would be able to work on half of the tasks in the shop. Even if the old man died now, he would be able to rest in peace. However, despite his comfort, he still put on a straight face and said indifferently, "It's all right, but you'll have to work harder. At your age, your patriarch can already refine a saint-level weapon, but you've only managed to refine a semi-saint one by sheer luck. You're still too far behind him. Got it?" Huyen Yichen nodded humbly. He didn't get to gloat for long. He felt a little lost and disappointed. Just then, Feng Wu beckoned at Huyen Yichen. "Hey, come over here." Huyen Yichen walked up to her and asked grumpily, "What?" Feng Wu said, "I'll teach you how to forge a semi-divine weapon." "Gosh." Huyen Yichen gave Feng Wu a "you idiot" look. Feng Wu said seriously, "I'm not joking." Huyen Yichen was speechless. Feng Wu said, "Help me with the forging. You'll see." Huyen Yichen felt a headache coming on. He decided that she wouldn't turn back until she ran into the wall. He would see how she was going to do it. After that, Huyen Yichen was ordered around by Feng Wu. She would make him add iron powder, set up an explosion, and cool things down. Chapter 3807, Stingy Shop, 5. Huyen Yichen almost lost his temper. Why was it so troublesome? However, when he recalled how the girl had introduced herself as a poor girl who had fled from the south, his heart softened. Forget it. She was so unlucky. I'll help her as my good deeds of the day, thought Huyen Yichen to himself. But before long, Huyen Yichen's eyes widened when he saw what he had made out of 3 pieces of scrap iron. What's that? After the girl's random instructions, Huyen Yichen realized that the iron he made wasn't dark iron. What's that? Huyen Yichen touched it and saw that it was made from a special material that shone with a divine light. It's so tough. Am I seeing things? Huyen Yichen rubbed his eyes in disbelief, but when he looked again, the iron was still there. He reached out and touched it, but the hardness didn't change. As a weapon refiner, he knew what that meant. He gave Feng Wu a strange look and didn't come back to himself for a long time. How was that possible? It was supposed to be a pile of junk, but no matter how hard he tried, it stayed useless. How? You made it by sheer luck, didn't you? Huyen Yichen looked at Feng Wu and murmured. Feng Wu asked, "What was that?" Huyen Yichen said, "Nothing." Was it luck? It had to be. Otherwise, how could a girl know weapon refining? He was from an influential family of refiners, and his grandfather used to be taught by the patriarch. Although Huyen Yichen had always been humble, he was actually quite influential in northern Yen. He didn't understand the girl at all. Just then, Feng Wu looked up and asked, "Where's that drawing?" Huyen Yichen asked involuntarily, "What drawing?" Feng Wu said, "Didn't Feng Sun give you the material to build an arm of discipline? Where's the drawing?" Huyen Yichen's face went scarlet red. "He lied to me." Feng Wu frowned before Huyen Yichen could finish. "You didn't lose the drawing, did you?" Huyen Yichen said, "That drawing was fake. My grandpa appraised it himself." Feng Wu said, "So?" Huyen Yichen gritted his teeth. "Just wait and see." He wanted to see what the girl was going to do. Huyen Yichen rushed into the room, came back with a small brocade box, and tossed it to Feng Wu. "See for yourself." Feng Wu opened the brocade box to find a drawing inside. She took it out and read it carefully. Huyen Yichen said grumpily, "It's fake, isn't it? I told you so. Their Feng Sun. If he dares to come to northern Yen again, I'll make him pay." Feng Wu gave Huyen Yichen a strange look. Huyan said, "What? He stole my pocket money for 10 years. Why can't I scold him?" Feng Wu shook her head. "You can't." Huyan asked, "Why?" Feng Wu didn't reply. Instead, she asked, "What do you want?" Huyan said, "What?" Feng Wu said, "How about I give you a copy of Refinable Metal Synthesis?" Huyan said, "What? Isn't that the legendary book?" He had heard the title of the book, but he had no idea what it was about. Chapter 3808, Refinable Metal Synthesis. Feng Wu asked in a serious tone, "Will a copy of Refinable Metal Synthesis be enough to exchange for the metal I just made and the drawing of this arm?" Of course. Huyan was so excited that he almost burst into tears. But how can you have it?" Huyan wouldn't believe it. Feng Wu said, "I just do." Huyan said, "If you have it, I'll trade with you." Feng Wu said, "It's a deal." Huyan was thrilled. Silly boy. A short distance away, old Huyan shook his head when he heard their conversation. Spiritual iron? Refinable metal synthesis? How childish. As Patriarch Huyan's outer sect disciple, the old man had only heard about the refinable metal synthesis that all refiners dreamed of learning. However, the girl had just given his grandson a refinable metal synthesis as a gift. It was like child's play. "Grandpa, Grandpa." Only then did Huyan come back to himself. He waved at the old man and said, "Grandpa, she really has forged the divine iron." Old Huyan wouldn't come over. He was still humming a tune and working on his flaming spear. He didn't believe Huyan at all. Huyan was about to drag his grandfather to his side when Feng Wu began to separate the drawing with a special liquid. It immediately caught his attention. "What are you doing?" Huyan moved closer and watched Feng Wu curiously. Feng Wu was careful but steady. Before long, Huyan saw that the edge of the fake drawing had been peeled off. "What?" Huyan eyes widened when he saw this. Because he saw that the edge of the drawing had split open from the edges. There were two drawings. They were stuck together with a special potion. Huyan held his breath, fearing that he might blow the drawing away. His heart was pounding, and he had a feeling that something big was going to happen. That was indeed the case. Feng Wu separated the drawings in less than 15 minutes. Right now, two drawings are sitting quietly on the table. One was what Huyan called a fake drawing, and the other one was a brand new one. Huyan didn't look at the drawing he had been looking at for nearly 10 years. Instead, he focused on the new one, and his eyes narrowed as he studied it. "Let's begin," Feng Wu told Huyan. Huyan stared at Feng Wu. "You mean?" Feng Wu said indifferently, "The one underneath is the real drawing of the arm of discipline, isn't it?" "Wasn't it?" Huyan wanted to agree with her, but "There's another one underneath. How can there be another one? I haven't heard of it after all these years." Scratching his head, Huyan burst into tears. Feng Wu smiled. "The person who made this drawing used a deceptive trick. Ordinary people won't be able to find it even if they stare at it for 100 years. There's no need to blame yourself." Huyan looked at Feng Wu in frustration. "So, I'm just an ordinary person?" Feng Wu asked, "What do you think?" Chapter 3809, The Arm of Discipline. Huyan was frustrated. He shook his head repeatedly. "I don't believe it. I don't believe it's the drawing of the arm." Feng Wu couldn't care less about his mood and began to order him around. Huyan said, "I don't believe that this drawing can be used to build the arm." Feng Wu said, "All right." However, Huyan was genuinely curious. Could she really make the arm of discipline? In the end, he couldn't fight back his curiosity and started working on it for Feng Wu. With Feng Wu around, he didn't have to worry about not doing a good job. Because if she didn't do it right, Feng Wu would smack down with the ruler. "That hurts. Why did you hit me?" Huyan gave Feng Wu a pleading look. Feng Wu said solemnly, "You'll thank me in the future. Keep going." Feng Wu was very strict, But Huyen Yichen was still a little inferior in his cultivation level, so he was having a hard time. He had to follow Feng Wu's instructions every single time before he could move on to the next step. Maybe not for the time being, but in the future, Huyen Yichen would be so grateful to Feng Wu that he would almost kneel down. Feng Wu had Huyen Yichen build one component after another. Huyen Yichen didn't see any hope and was frustrated. A few days later, Huyen Yichen finally met all Feng Wu's requirements. He stuck out his tongue and was exhausted. "I'm exhausted." Huyen Yichen let out a breath of relief. "You've made everything you need, haven't you? Is that enough?" Huyen Yichen gave Feng Wu an aggrieved look. Feng Wu had been giving him pointers over and over again in the past few days, and Huyen Yichen wasn't an idiot. On the contrary, he was a very talented refiner and had long seen through Feng Wu. She couldn't have done it by accident but had to be someone with real talent. At that thought, Huyen Yichen couldn't help but glance at Feng Wu. The girl was so young, but she was already so capable. That couldn't be. Huyen Yichen looked at the iron platform again. If these parts were put together. Under Huyen Yichen's gaze, Feng Wu began to combine the parts. Just then, old Huyen finally finished working on his flaming spear and wrapped up. He carefully examined the sacred weapon he had made himself. It was the second sacred weapon of his life, and the first one was without a doubt Strike One. Old Huyen thought that if other people knew that he had such a sacred weapon, many masters would come to him for it. The more he thought about it, the more pleased he became. He glanced over in passing and saw that Huyen Yichen was still standing there, so he walked up to him. Old Huyen was about to scold his grandson when he saw Feng Wu assembling some spare parts. This girl's hands were so steady. She was as good as a refiner at his level. Old Huyen was about to say something when he saw the spare parts in Feng Wu's hands. He wasn't looking at how the parts were put together, but what they were made of. "Is that divine iron?" Huyen's eyes lit up. Huyen Yichen nudged him. "Grandpa, stay out of my way." He moved closer to Feng Wu as he spoke, fearing that he would miss a single step. He had a feeling that if he missed this chance, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Chapter 38:10 The Arm of Discipline 3. All old Huyen could think of was the metal. Divine iron? Where did that come from? He murmured to himself. Huyen Yichen said grumpily, "That was days ago. Didn't you notice?" Old Huyen didn't notice it because all his attention was on his flame spear. At that thought, old Huyen snorted. "My task is a big deal. I don't have time for kids' stuff like this." After that, he turned to leave. Huyen Yichen couldn't help but ask, "Grandpa, are you done?" Of course. Old Huyen had always been very confident in his skills. "A Saint Level 1? Huyen Yichen asked curiously. "Of course." Old Huyen raised his chin and waited for his grandson's praise. But his grandson changed the subject. He took old Huyen's hand and led him to Feng Wu's side. "Grandpa, what level is this arm?" "An arm of discipline?" Old Huyen frowned. "No ordinary refiner can make it. Plus, your drawing was fake. I told you already. Apart from your patriarch, no one else can make an arm of discipline." However, before he could finish, he heard a calm voice. "Done." By then, Feng Wu had finished assembling all the parts. It was slightly bigger than a human arm and had a metallic sheen to it. It reminded one of the fangs of a ferocious beast, which could take a person's life at any moment. "Is it the arm of discipline?" Old Huyen shook his head. "I think it's just an ordinary arm booster. The real one isn't like this." "What does it look like then?" Huyen Yichen asked curiously before Feng Wu could say anything. As a matter of fact, Huyen had only heard about it before but hadn't seen it in person. Therefore, he didn't know what to say. "Grandpa, look at this drawing. It's exactly like this." Huyen Yichen handed the real drawing to the old man. "Wait a minute." Huyen's eyes widened when he saw the drawing. He couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. "Where did you get it? Why is it here?" Huyen Yichen asked. "Grandpa, is it real?" Old man Huyen murmured, "I think it's real if I'm not mistaken. Look at the curve, the tenacity, and the sharpness." But how is it possible for anyone to build something like this? But Grandpa, we've made it already. Huyen-Ichen looked at the old man. I made them myself. Bullshit. Old Huyen wouldn't believe it. I know perfectly well what you're capable of. You can't possibly build something like that. Even I can't do it. Huyen-Ichen was almost in tears. It's true, Grandpa. I really made it myself. Miss Feng taught me herself. Old Huyen looked at Feng Wu suspiciously and asked, Kiddo, is that true? Feng Wu nodded. Old Huyen said, Can you show me the arm? Feng Wu glanced at him. Didn't you say it wasn't real? Old Huyen cleared his throat. Chapter 38:11, The Arm of Discipline 4. He hadn't checked it yet, so of course he didn't know if it was real. But the arm was definitely made of divine iron. Feng Wu put the arm on. Once she put it on, her right arm seemed to have become a robotic one, which looked rather out of place. Just then Feng Wu frowned. Because she felt the arm bite her. She could feel a bite on her wrist, and blood was oozing out of it. Huyen had been watching the arm the whole time, so he didn't notice the look on Feng Wu's face, nor did he know that the arm was absorbing the blood. I think it's a saint-level weapon. Old Huyen looked amazed. I can't believe that the two of you can build a saint-level weapon right under my nose. That's so. He didn't know what to say. He considered himself to be very talented in the metal element, but at his age he could only make 2 saint-level weapons. How could these 2 kids make one already? Feng Wu didn't move and let the arm suck her blood. She vented her sarcasm inwardly. She had the divine phoenix blood and hoped the arm wouldn't go too far. That was enough. After a while, Feng Wu could no longer feel the pain. The arm had probably absorbed enough blood. Wait, that gloss, that quality. Old Huyen's eyes lit up. Why do I feel that the arm is more than a saint-level one? But he didn't say it aloud because it was impossible. Even he had to exceed his capability to make 2 saint-level weapons in his lifetime. How could these 2 kids possibly make something more advanced than that? There was no doubt about it. Just then, Feng Wu activated her arm. With a whoosh, the fist of the arm smashed into the iron table. Rumble! The meter-thick iron platform was smashed into a lump of iron by the arm. Old Huyen stared at Feng Wu in astonishment. Huyen-Ichen stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. Huyen-Ichen swallowed and stared at Feng Wu in bewilderment. I thought you didn't have any spiritual essence. Huyen-Ichen hadn't sensed any spiritual essence from Feng Wu so far, which was why he had assumed that she didn't know anything about cultivation. However, what she did just then, Feng Wu was pleasantly surprised. The arm was more powerful than she had expected, and it had to be at least a semi-divine weapon. Feng Wu glanced at Huyen-Ichen. One can't attack without spiritual essence? You're so ignorant. Huyen-Ichen glanced at his dumbfounded grandfather, then turned to Feng Wu eagerly. Can I see it? Can I? Feng Wu took off the arm and handed it to Huyen-Ichen. It'll fit you automatically when you put it on. Try it. The arm wasn't an inanimate object, but a living one because of the divine metal. Huyen-Ichen was pleasantly surprised. He had put it on. I'll test its power. Huyen-Ichen shouted. Iron Tower, come out. As soon as Huyen-Ichen said those words, a figure as tall as an iron tower appeared. Chapter 38:12, Flaming Arm 1. As soon as Huyen-Ichen said those words, a figure as tall as an iron tower appeared. Feng Wu looked over and saw that the person was 3 meters tall. He had bulging muscles and looked very strong. Bring it on. Huyen-Ichen aimed his arm at the man. Iron Tower smirked. To him, his young master was as weak as a chicken. He could pick the boy up without breaking a sweat. That was what he thought and what he did. Therefore, he only waved his hand as if he was playing a game. However, the next moment, SSSS. Iron Tower drew in his breath, for his young master's right arm was very tough, and a sharp blade suddenly appeared in his palm. The sharp blade stabbed into the back of Iron Tower's hand. However, Iron Tower had a very strong defense system. The blade was only able to make an inch in before it was stopped. Even so, it was enough to attract his attention. "Young master, that's an interesting arm." Despite his words, Ta Tai didn't think much of the arm. Huyen Yichen relied on his speed in battles, so he moved as fast as he could. He was changing directions all the time. The arm of discipline was also making unpredictable moves with his right arm. Several times Iron Tower was hit. He was covered with wounds, but they were all minor ones. Iron Tower looked at Huyen Yichen and said, "Young master, I don't want to play games anymore." The next second, he expanded. He was already 3 meters tall, but now he was even bigger. He kicked Huyen Yichen away. Huyen Yichen fell to the ground with a thump. He couldn't accept the fact that he still couldn't defeat Iron Tower. "Young master, please give in," Iron Tower said indifferently. Huyen Yichen gritted his teeth. "No. I'm going to defeat you. I can only defeat him if I defeat you." Iron Tower frowned. "Young master, you can't even defeat me, let alone your enemy. Just stay here." He turned to leave after that. Feng Wu was confused. Huyen Yichen had to defeat Iron Tower to defeat his enemy? Who was his enemy? Seeing the pained look on Huyen Yichen's face, Feng Wu went up to him and reminded him in a low voice. Huyen Yichen's eyes lit up. "Stop right there. I'll try again." Huyen Yichen shouted at Iron Tower. However, Iron Tower didn't even look back. "Stop right there." Huyen Yichen suddenly aimed at Iron Tower, and a black arrow flew out of his arm, aiming at the ladder's back. Iron Tower turned around and caught the arrow with one hand. To his surprise, the next second, the arrow exploded. There was an unknown liquid in the arrow, and it was highly inflammable. The liquid splashed all over him. The next second, flames rose out of Iron Tower and engulfed him. Ah! He buried his head in his hands and didn't know what to do. Iron Tower, Huyen Yichen was equally anxious. Iron Tower was his guard, not his enemy. He had been too reckless. Chapter 38-13, Flaming Arm, 2. "Young master, I give in. Help me." Iron Tower was almost in tears. Huyen Yichen rushed over to put out the fire for him. After the fire was put out, Huyen Yichen saw Iron Tower had been charred black. Huyen Yichen said guiltily, "Iron Tower." Iron Tower waved his hand and wiped his face, but he wasn't injured. After all, he was very well defended. I'm fine. Iron Tower waved his hands, still shaken from the explosion. He almost peed his pants. Seeing that Iron Tower was all right, Huyen Yichen sat down on the ground and let out a breath of relief. "I almost peed my pants too." After that, they both looked at Feng Wu. Although Iron Tower had been staying outside for the past few days, he knew perfectly well that the girl had been instructing his young master on how to build everything. Whenever his master's work didn't meet her standards, she would strike him repeatedly with a stick. Several times, Iron Tower almost couldn't control himself anymore. Huyen Yichen rose to his feet and slowly walked up to Feng Wu. His eyes were filled with astonishment and pleasant surprise. "Iron Tower and I are 2 levels apart. I thought I wouldn't be his match no matter what, but..." If Huyen Yichen wanted to kill Iron Tower, he had a million ways to do it when the man was on fire. Feng Wu stared at the arm of discipline. "That arm is an incredible weapon." Huyen Yichen's eyes twinkled as he looked at his right arm. By then, old Master Huyen had taken a step forward, and all his attention was on the arm. "Take it off. Let me have a closer look," the old man told Huyen Yichen. Huyen Yichen didn't want to, but he took it off in the end. Huyen couldn't keep his hands off it. As he studied it, he murmured, "This is so much better than the saint-level one I made before." Huyen Yichen asked curiously, "Grandpa, what level is this weapon? Is it really much better than a saint-level one?" But a saint-level weapon is already very rare. Even Strike 1 is only a saint-level weapon. We've never seen a divine weapon before. "It's not a divine weapon yet, but only a semi-divine one," said old Huyen. "The one Princess Rao has is a semi-divine one." Huyen Yichen cried out, "Princess Rao thinks very highly of that thing." It's as good as her own life. Old Huyen kept his gaze on the arm and didn't say another word. Seeing that the old man was absorbed in his study, Feng Wu didn't disturb him. Just then, Huyen Yichen finally looked at Feng Wu. "Kiddo, you're amazing." Huyen Yichen smiled so broadly that his eyes couldn't be seen. He was so enthusiastic that he immediately went up to Feng Wu and poured her some tea. Feng Wu glanced at him. "You don't doubt my ability anymore?" Huyen Yichen said, "Gosh, you're a semi-divine weapon refiner. You're amazing." He gave Feng Wu a thumbs up as he spoke. "Well?" Huyen Yichen nudged Feng Wu with his elbow and stammered. Feng Wu asked, "What?" Huyen Yichen said, "Since the arm is so useful, why don't we work together and make a few more of them? It'll sell like hotcakes. Shall we split the profit? 50-50. Chapter 38:14, 50-50. Shall we split the profit 50-50? Huyen Yichen looked at Feng Wu in excitement. Feng Wu rolled her eyes at him and turned to leave. Huyen Yichen immediately caught up with her. "Hey, don't leave even if you don't agree to that offer. All right, no 50-50. How about 60-40? But Feng Wu didn't stop. Huyen Yichen said, 70-30. That's the lowest I'll go. I'll take 30% and you take 70%. That's very generous of me. Feng Wu glanced at him. Huyen Yichen stumbled back. Why are you looking at me like that? He felt a little flustered. Feng Wu finally said, that's impossible. Huyen Yichen looked at Feng Wu stubbornly. Then tell me, how do you want to split the profit? Feng Wu said grumpily, that's the only one. Huyen Yichen was shocked. What's that supposed to mean? Feng Wu said, you heard me. Huyen Yichen said, why are there only? Feng Wu asked indifferently, do you have any more of that iron? Huyen Yichen said, He realized that Feng Sun was the one who had set him up with those pieces of junk. He had left them in a corner to remind himself of his revenge. Who would have thought that they could be used to forge a piece of divine iron? Feng Wu shrugged. I forgot to mention that the value of the metal can't be measured by money. There's only a handful of them in this world. I'll build one for you when you find more of it. She had the blueprint anyway. Huyen Yichen said, but... He had wanted to make a small fortune with it, but as it turned out, he didn't even have an arm to use himself. Well, then, Huyen Yichen followed her and asked gingerly, are you selling this arm? Feng Wu glanced at him. Aren't you going to take it? Huyen Yichen threw a dirty look at Feng Wu. Of course not. Haven't we made a deal already? We've signed the agreement, so why should I take it? But I really like this arm. Feng Wu said, me too. Huyen Yichen could only smile bitterly. A gentleman shouldn't take other people's favorite. If the arm is yours, it's yours. No one can take it away, not even me. But don't worry. I'll work hard to find more divine iron. You'll build a new one for me when I find it. Feng Wu said, all right. Huyen Yichen sighed with emotion. You're amazing. I didn't know you could build something like this. Grandpa, is it really a semi-divine weapon? Huyen Yichen still couldn't believe it. Old Huyen was too absorbed in the weapon to pay any attention to Huyen Yichen. That was why Huyen Yichen knew that it had to be a semi-divine weapon. Otherwise, his grandfather wouldn't have been so excited because he had made 2 saint-level weapons himself. You're amazing. Patting Feng Wu on the shoulder, Huyen Yichen said in amazement, Grandpa has been saying that I'm a natural refiner and that I'll be even more amazing in the future, but compared to you, Huyen Yichen was ashamed of his own inferiority. However, Huyen Yichen patted Feng Wu on the shoulder again. But luck is fair. It won't favor a person. If it opens a door for you, it'll close the window. Feng Wu was confused. What do you mean? Why didn't she understand? Huyen Yichen grinned. You don't know how to cultivate. It's like God has closed the window for you. Chapter 38:15, Huyen Hongjun. Feng Wu gave him another strange look without saying a word. Huyen Yichen stared at Feng Wu. What do you want to say? Feng Wu said, you'll see. Huyen Yichen wondered if he had missed something. Feng Wu only smiled at him without saying a word. Just then they heard footsteps outside. "Who's here?" Hearing the knock on the door, Huyen Yichen frowned and told Iron Tower, "Go have a look." Iron Tower soon came back with a few people. The leader was a pretty teenage girl. She had long, slender eyebrows that reminded one of a fox in the mountains. She was alluring and enchanting, but the lower half of her face was very innocent. Together, they formed an enchanting and pure face that was both unforgettable and attractive. The girl held a white fox in her arms. Her face was ghastly pale, and she seemed to be very weak. Wrapped in a thick cape, she looked even smaller and more endearing. She had 2 maids with her, and Feng Wu knew them. They were Caixia and Muley, whom she had met on the way here. Without a doubt, she was the legendary Princess Rao. Something flickered in Feng Wu's lowered eyes. Princess Rao, who had tried to kill Feng Wu before meeting her, was finally here. Feng Wu made up her mind that she would never forgive those who tried to kill her. A younger teenager stood next to the girl. Meanwhile, Huyen Yichen was exchanging angry looks with the teenager. "Huyen Hongjun, how dare you come here?" Huyen Yichen glared at him. Old Huyen finally woke up from his reverie and threw a dirty look at Huyen. "Yichen, watch your language with His Royal Highness." "A prince?" Feng Wu thought to herself. It was said that the 3rd prince and Princess Rao had the same mother. However, the 3rd prince was a misbehaving man with a vile conduct, which gave the emperor a headache. Therefore, the right to inherit the throne was between Princess Rao and the eldest prince, and the 3rd prince wasn't an option. Seeing the animosity between Huyen Yichen and the 3rd prince, Feng Wu knew that there was something between the two of them. Princess Rao waved her hand and said casually, "Hongjun, come back." The 3rd prince gave Huyen Yichen an arrogant glance, snorted, and went to Princess Rao's side. Princess Rao walked up to Huyen Yichen, sat down on a chair, and cut to the chase. "Have you seen anyone suspicious these days?" The 2 maids had made sure that everything was in order. Chairs had been brought out to be wiped clean, and even tea had been prepared. Feng Wu noticed that Huyen Yichen didn't like Princess Rao because he frowned and said impatiently, "What suspicious person? And why should I answer your question?" Before Princess Rao could say anything, the 3rd prince smirked. "Huyen Yichen, who the hell do you think you are? How dare you talk to my sister like that? Your family is such a distant relative that we can barely be considered to be related." Huyen Yichen looked as if he couldn't be bothered to talk to the 3rd prince. He frowned at Princess Rao and said, "Ask your question and leave. You know perfectly well that you're not welcome here." Feng Wu was bewildered. Huyen Yichen was supposed to be a warm, hospitable teenager, but now... Chapter 38:16. What happened back then? Feng Wu was perplexed. Huyen Yichen was supposed to be a warm, hospitable teenager, but now, he was obviously very hostile toward Princess Rao and her brother. Princess Rao only smiled. "Brother Yichen, please don't mind him. He's just a kid with a bad temper. You're older than him. Please be more patient." Huyen Yichen smirked. "A kid? More like a cannibal." He didn't reply and only stared at Princess Rao. Princess Rao asked, "Have you seen this person?" After that, she took out a portrait and handed it to Huyen Yichen. Huyen Yichen took it and cried out, "Holy crap! Who's this girl? She's so pretty." His eyes twinkled as he looked up at Princess Rao and asked, "Who's this girl? Who is she?" Princess Rao was speechless. Feng Wu noticed that she had clenched her fists in her sleeves and forced a smile. She said to Huyen Yichen, "Just tell me. Have you seen her?" Feng Wu glanced at the portrait and saw that it was indeed her face on it. Meanwhile, Huyen Yichen was too absorbed in the painting to hear what Princess Rao said. Princess Rao's eyes flickered, but she still smiled. "Brother Yichen, what? Are you talking to me?" Huyen Yichen looked at her in bewilderment and chuckled. "Is she a real person?" Princess Rao nodded. Huyen Yichen sighed with emotion. "She has to be the prettiest girl in the world. I don't think any girl on this continent will be her match." Princess Rao took a deep breath. She was about to say something when Huyan Yichen went on. I wonder who's going to win her heart in the future. Shall I join the competition? Princess Rao was a little annoyed. Before she could say anything, Saisha took the initiative and smiled obsequiously. Young Master Yichen, our princess is saying that your shop has been here this whole time. Have you seen this girl around? Huyan Yichen threw a dirty look at her and bellowed, Are you an idiot? If I had met her, I would never have asked your princess if that's a real person. Saisha didn't dare to make a sound. She would have argued with anyone else, but although young Master Yichen was a very distant relative of the royal family, old Master Huyan was an excellent weapon refiner. Huyan Yichen was also the most promising weapon refiner in the northern Yan kingdom. Huyan Yichen was famous, talented, and had a promising future. Even the princess wouldn't offend him. As expected, no matter what she thought, Princess Rao still forced a smile. Brother Yichen still holds grudges against me for what happened back then. However, Huyan Yichen only smirked. Yes, I do. Don't you know that? If you hadn't protected him, Huyan Yichen sounded indignant and aggrieved. Feng Wu noticed that the rims of his eyes had turned red, and he looked like he wanted to beat Huyan Hongjun up. However, the third prince was as arrogant as a peacock. He glanced at Huyan Yichen and said, It wasn't all my fault. My sister has forced me to apologize to you. What more do you want? Chapter 38:17, Princess Raoshi. What more do you want? Are you going to kill me now? The third prince walked up to Huyan Yichen and sneered at him. You want to kill me? Bring it on. I'm right here in front of you. I'd like to see how you're going to do it. Infuriated, Huyan Yichen was about to charge at him. Old Huyan stepped out and grabbed him. Meanwhile, Princess Rao also grabbed the third prince's hand and gave him a warning look. Huyan Hongjun rubbed his nose and looked away, but Huyan Yichen was so angry that he was trembling. Feng Wu patted Huyan Yichen on the back to comfort him, somehow feeling sorry for him. Feng Wu didn't think she should confront Princess Rao now, but the princess was still on her blacklist, and she wouldn't let the princess get away with it. Princess Rao glared at Huyan Hongjun. Apologize. Huyan Hongjun raised his chin. No. Princess Rao said, Huyan Hongjun. The third prince couldn't understand it. Sister, am I a prince or not? If that's the case, why should I apologize to him? I've apologized for what happened back then. It's up to him whether he accepts it or not. I won't say sorry. So what if he has lost a sister? I had a cold for 3 days too. I'm a respected prince. Princess Rao took a deep breath. To be honest, she agreed with the third prince, but she still had to put on a show. After all, Huyan Yichen was still very useful. However, before she could finish, old Huyan said coldly, The person you're looking for hasn't been here. You can leave now. Princess Rao knew that the old man had been utterly offended this time. The old man wouldn't have mattered, but he was the one who used to talk to the patriarch. Rising to her feet, Princess Rao smiled bitterly at the old man. My brother was to be blamed for what happened back then. As his sister, I didn't teach him well. I apologize to you. After that she bowed. Old Huyan didn't respond. Princess Rao smiled bitterly. She was about to leave when she saw old Huyan's right arm. Wait a minute. Princess Rao cried out in surprise. Isn't that? Old Huyan frowned. How could he have forgotten about that? He had forgotten to put away the semi-divine weapon. Meanwhile, Princess Rao couldn't look away from the arm of discipline. Seeing that old Huyan wouldn't speak, she went on. Old master, is that really the arm of discipline? Seeing the look in Princess Rao's eyes, old Huyan realized that something wasn't right. He knew that Princess Rao might be a fragile girl, but once she made up her mind, she would make sure that she got what she wanted. But the arm wasn't his. If Princess Rao took it away because of him, the old master wouldn't be able to answer Feng Wu. Did you build this arm? If you ask me, it's a semi-divine one, isn't it? Asked Princess Rao. Old Huyan nodded perfunctorily and said to Iron Tower, See them out. But Princess Rao waved him off. Wait. She asked, Old master, would you like to sell this arm? Old Huyen sighed in resignation. He knew it. He gave Feng Wu a guilty look. Meanwhile, Princess Rao had been staring at the old man, so she followed his gaze. Chapter 38:18, Is It For Sale? 1. Her eyes met Feng Wu's. Princess Rao frowned a little. Who is she? She was so ordinary that one could call her ugly. Moreover, she wasn't capable at all. However, she was neither humble nor overbearing, looking as if the princess had offended her. Princess Rao found her ridiculous. She was a princess who had lived a comfortable life, and everyone else had followed her orders. However, she had been set off repeatedly today. Fearing that Feng Wu might get hurt, Huyen Yichen blocked her way and glared at Princess Rao. Why do you care who she is? Get lost. Princess Rao grew up with Huyen Yichen, and with what happened back then, Huyen Yichen knew her too well. Since Huyen Yichen knew that, Princess Rao stopped pretending. She looked from Feng Wu to old Huyen. Old master, are you selling this arm? Her tone became serious. Old man Huyen frowned. He knew very well that Princess Rao wanted it, and once the princess made up her mind, she would be in a lot of trouble. Even so, old Huyen still shook his head. I'm keeping it for someone else. How can I sell it? Really? They put it there? Staring at the arm, Princess Rao smiled. Who put it here? Neither Huyen Yichen nor the old wanted to reveal the owner, but Feng Wu couldn't bring them into trouble. She stepped out and said indifferently, It's mine. You. Princess Rao glanced at Feng Wu in an arrogant manner. Huyen Yichen was furious. Dragging Feng Wu to his side, he shot her a warning glance and feigned an angry tone. What are you talking about? However, by then, Princess Rao had already turned her attention to Feng Wu. Holding the fox in her arms, she caressed it, but kept her gaze on Feng Wu. She didn't say anything, but the people around her took the hint. Kai Xiao went up to Feng Wu and said, Name your price. Both Huyen Yichen and the old man looked at Feng Wu because they couldn't make that decision for her. Feng Wu took the arm from old Huyen and casually put it on. Cai Xiao frowned, stared at Feng Wu and said, I'm talking to you. Name your price. Feng Wu ignored the maid. She only glanced at Princess Rao, then turned to leave. Stop! Cai Xiao glared at Feng Wu. Didn't you hear me? How dare you refuse to sell it to us? Feng Wu looked over her shoulder at Huyen Yichen. So, they're trying to force me to sell it. Huyen Yichen said, I think so. Feng Wu asked, Can I not sell it? Huyen Yichen crossed his arms and smiled at Feng Wu. Of course. Feng Wu said, But, am I going to get attacked for that? Huyen Yichen glanced at Princess Rao and said to Feng Wu, According to the rules of Northern Yen, even a princess can't force you to do that. Otherwise, she'll be punished like a commoner. Feng Wu asked, Is she going to kill me and take my things? Huyen Yichen chuckled. Don't go anywhere. Just stay here in my shop. I'd like to see who dares to kill you. He sneered at Princess Rao as he spoke. Meanwhile, Chapter 38:19, Is It For Sale? 2. Meanwhile, Princess Rao was so displeased that she didn't try to hide it anymore. A hush fell over the crowd, and the temperature seemed to drop. Huyen Yichen gave her a half-smile. What? Are you going to force her to sell it to you? Taking a deep breath, Princess Rao fought back her anger. She then turned to old Huyen with a smile. Old master, how about you make me a new one? Old Huyen waved his hand. No. Princess Rao asked, Why? Old Huyen shook his head. Do you know who made this arm? He didn't say it outright, for he didn't know if it would harm Feng Wu. It was impossible to build a second one now. Therefore, he didn't say anything. However, Huyen Yichen gloated. Who made it? Let me tell you. This girl here made it herself. Princess Rao rolled her eyes. Huyen Yichen said, Why won't you believe me? She really made it herself. He pointed at a stove a short distance away. There are crumbs here. I haven't cleaned them yet. One look and you'll know that I'm not bragging. Princess Rao didn't believe him, but she still shot Saixia a warning glance. Saixia walked up to the stove and examined it. She then frowned, walked back to Princess Rao, and whispered something in her ear. Princess Rao looked at her in bewilderment. Saixia nodded. Holding the snow fox in her arms, Princess Rao strolled to the stove. There were more refiners in northern Yen than in other countries, and Princess Rao had learned the basics as well. She could tell right away. Was the arm really made here? Princess Rao didn't ask Huyen Yichen but only stared at the old man. Huyen Yichen's words couldn't be trusted, but the old man was well respected. He might try to keep it a secret, but he would never lie. Meanwhile, old Huyen waved his hand. Just ask Yichen. Princess Rao's stomach lurched because that meant. Huyen Yichen crossed his arms proudly as if he had made the arm himself. However, he was genuinely proud of it. After all, he was the one who had found the girl. Instead of asking Huyen Yichen, Princess Rao walked up to Feng Wu and stared at her again. Princess Rao was used to be so superior. No matter how humble she was, she still looked condescending, which wasn't very comfortable for other people. Meanwhile, she kept her gaze on Feng Wu and said indifferently, "So, should I call you a refiner now?" Feng Wu nodded indifferently. Princess Rao said, "Make me an arm then. Name your terms." Feng Wu didn't turn her down right away. Instead, she said, "It's doable." All eyes were on Feng Wu. After a pause, Feng Wu smiled again. "Get the materials first." Materials? Princess Rao was confused. Huyen Yichen said unhurriedly, "That's right. Get the materials first. You can't make bricks without straws." Princess Rao asked, "What materials?" Huyen Yichen pointed at the stove. "Didn't you see the iron filings? Find someone to study them, and you'll know what they are." He looked like he wanted to chase the princess away. But Princess Rao still frowned and asked, "What about the materials for this arm?" Chapter 3820, Is it for sale? 3. That's a great question. Huyen Yichen gloated. Of course, little Feng Sun gave me the materials himself. Huyen Yichen was elated. He had thought that Feng Sun had set him up and had been trying to take revenge all these years, but as it turned out, he wasn't humiliated but had taken advantage of Feng Sun instead. Princess Rao was confused. Feng Sun is here in northern Yen. Feng Wu was equally confused. Did Princess Rao know Feng Sun? In that case, did she know Jun Linyuan as well? Huyen Yichen waved his hand. "I've refined all the materials from that pile of iron and only made one arm. If you want more, go to Feng Sun. I can't help you." Princess Rao nodded, gave the arm on Feng Wu's arm another long look, then left. As soon as Princess Rao was gone, Huyen Yichen let out a breath of relief. Finally, she's gone. Feng Wu smiled at him. "Are you afraid of her?" Huyen Yichen said, "Of course not. I'm not afraid of her. I'm just a gentleman." Feng Wu shrugged as if saying, "If you say so." Huyen Yichen glanced at Feng Wu and looked concerned. "But, you have to be careful. From now on, don't leave the house unless you have to. If you must go out, bring me or Iron Tower with you. Got it?" Feng Wu said, "So, you're saying that she'll take the arm from me?" Huyen Yichen said, "You're underestimating her. Princess Rao has more capable men than you can count. She's one of His Majesty's heirs." Feng Wu asked curiously, "Can your princess be the successor to the throne as well?" Huyen Yichen nodded. "According to His Majesty, the royal family doesn't have any children but only heirs. We're doing this to make northern Yen stronger. For instance, His Majesty isn't the previous king's son but a cousin. Because His Majesty's sons were either mediocre or useless, they couldn't lead northern Yen to greatness. The Crown Prince and Princess Rao will compete for the throne in the end. That's why I said that Princess Rao wasn't to be trifled with because she may be the next successor." Huyen Yichen shrugged. "But even if she becomes the queen, I won't show her any courtesy." Feng Wu sighed inwardly. The countries around the Zhenwu Empire weren't all incredible forces. The Dongsang Kingdom had a blood tax system, and the northern Yen kingdom had a conglomerate system in that the heir to the throne wasn't limited to the ruler's offspring. The Junwu Empire was the only one that had a monarchy. Luckily, Jun Linyuan was the crown prince. If the second prince were to become the future emperor, the Junwu Empire might not be able to survive. Recalling what happened earlier, Feng Wu asked curiously, "Do you have grudges against that prince from before?" Huyan Yichen looked embarrassed when the subject was brought up. Feng Wu waved her hands. "If you don't want to talk about it." Huyan Yichen mumbled, "It's not like I can't tell you." He looked up and saw that his grandfather had left. "I can tell you," said Huyan Yichen. "You're living with us now, and to Huyan Hongjun, you're on our side. He won't let you off the hook when he tries to hurt me." Chapter 38:21. Did you meet him? 1. Feng Wu asked curiously, "I think he did you wrong. Why is he taking revenge?" Huyan Yichen smirked. "Do you expect him to know that?" He then told Feng Wu why he hated the third prince so much. Many years ago, Huyan Yichen had a younger sister who was only 5 years old. Back then, the third prince was only 3 years older than her and was at his most mischievous age. Back then, she didn't like hanging out with the third prince, but he insisted on hanging out with her. The prince's mother then took her into the imperial palace, but in the end, Huyan Yichen received news of his sister's death. According to the queen, his sister had fallen into the water, and the third prince had tried to save her, but Huyan Yichen smirked. "Like hell I will. My sister hates water, and she's so oyet and well-behaved. Would she Olav in the water? Someone must be lying." Later, the queen tried to compensate the Huyan family, but the old man turned her down. The incident only calmed down when the king handled it himself. However, the third prince and queen were the only ones who had gotten over it. As for Huyan Yichen, he had never forgotten his grudge. Huyan Yichen smirked. "He tried to save my sister? One day, I'll slap him and make him tell the truth." Feng Wu patted him on the shoulder. "I'm on your side." Huyan Yichen said, "Yes." That night, when Feng Wu went to bed, she finally saw Little Phoenix, who had disappeared for days. Feng Wu's eyes widened when she saw the filthy Little Phoenix with its injured wing. "Why are you injured?" She had been so busy forging the arm that she had almost forgotten about Little Phoenix. Little Phoenix had said that it was going to find Huyan Yanba, but it was injured when it returned. Little Phoenix pursed its lips and looked frustrated. Feng Wu asked curiously, "What happened? Did someone stop you? You couldn't get in? You had a fight, and you lost?" Feng Wu knew Little Phoenix too well. It wouldn't tell her anything if she asked in a normal way, so she tried to goad it into action. As expected, the bird flared up. "Lost? Me? How can I lose? I'd rather die than lose." Feng Wu smiled and cajoled it. "That's right. You're the best bird in the world. No other bird is as good as you." However, that was actually not the right thing to say now. Little Phoenix gave Feng Wu a resentful look, turned around in frustration, and crouched down with its back to her. Feng Wu pursed her lips again and patted its butt. "Tell me, what happened? Did you see your little Yanba?" Little Phoenix glanced at Feng Wu in frustration and rubbed its feathers. Feng Wu said, "So, you didn't get to see him?" Little Phoenix stomped its foot and said in frustration, "If that stupid bird hadn't stopped me, I would have been able to get in." Feng Wu rubbed her chin. "Let me guess. Are you saying that there's a bird inside that's more capable than you?" Little Phoenix didn't buy it. "That's because I've only just recovered my ability. I'll be much more capable than it in the future. It's nothing. I'll kick its ass." Feng Wu fought back her laughter. All right. You'll be very capable in the future. So, you couldn't get in now, could you?" Little Phoenix turned around angrily. Chapter 38:22. Did you meet him, too? Feng Wu laughed. Little Phoenix turned around and glared at Feng Wu. "Stop laughing." Feng Wu asked curiously, "But have you really not seen Senior Brother Huyan?" Little Phoenix shook its head. "No, I couldn't. That bird was blocking my way." Said, how about you show me the way? I'll see if I can handle that bird. Little Phoenix hesitated. You're too weak to go in now. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. That was a dead end. Rubbing her chin, Feng Wu was trying to figure out a way to meet Patriarch Huyenwen. There was a tiny noise outside. Little Phoenix stiffened. It then whispered to Feng Wu in its head, "Someone's coming. Hide." Feng Wu nodded. She quickly rolled up the duvet so that it looked like someone was sleeping under it, then hid behind the door. The next second, smoke slowly blew into the room. Someone had used the enchanting incense. Didn't she know that Feng Wu was an expert in medicine? Taking a sniff, Feng Wu realized that the level of the toxin was quite high. It wasn't something just anyone could make. It had to be a supreme-level knockout powder. Who was coming to her room in the middle of the night? What did they want? Feng Wu looked at the arm on her right arm involuntarily and narrowed her eyes. The people outside had no idea that Feng Wu had neutralized the toxin and were still blowing it into the room. Little Phoenix glanced at Feng Wu, who nodded at it. Hence, Little Phoenix squeezed out of the open window and quietly hid behind the person outside. The bird had an invisibility skill, which enabled it to do great things in the Hua family. After Little Phoenix flew out, it saw a man dressed in black blowing toxins into the room. It looked around and reported back to Feng Wu. Old Huyen was drugged, and so were Huyen Yichen and Iron Tower. Everyone in the family is lying there now. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Little Phoenix sighed with emotion as it flew. They're good at forging weapons, but they're not very capable in terms of cultivation. They won't be able to protect you. Feng Wu smiled bitterly. Let's get down to business. Little Phoenix smiled bitterly as well. That's right. A lot of people are here. There are 6 people outside your door and 2 each outside the old Huyen Yichen, and Iron Tower's room. Feng Wu asked, how capable are they? Little Phoenix heaved a long sigh. If they were just a bunch of random people, I would just annihilate them all. However, they're all very capable people. The weaker ones are guarding the Huyen family, and they're only junior spiritual overlords. But there are 4 intermediate spiritual overlords and 2 peak spiritual overlords guarding your door. Who on earth is so resourceful? They sent so many people to kill a good-for-nothing like you, who has lost all her spiritual essence. How terrifying! There were so many of them. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She looked down at her arm of discipline. Without spiritual essence, she couldn't exert its full power. What should she do now? If she woke up the Huyen family, what if they got killed? Do you know who sent them? Little Phoenix asked Feng Wu curiously. Feng Wu nodded. I do. Little Phoenix asked, who is it? Feng Wu said indifferently, apart from that Princess Rao, there's no one else. Chapter 38-23. Did you meet him? 3. Little Phoenix was surprised. She knows where you live. Feng Wu shook her head. Little Phoenix said, that is to say, she targeted you again without recognizing who you are. Feng Wu nodded. Little Phoenix said, are you her archenemy now? Feng Wu shrugged with a wry smile. So, what should we do now? Little Phoenix asked Feng Wu. I'm a spiritual overlord now, and I'm a peak 1. I've only just woken up from this enlightenment, and I'm already very capable. Feng Wu nodded. Impressive. Little Phoenix said, yes, but you're still a cripple. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Little Phoenix said, I can take care of 1 peak-level spiritual overlord, but there are still so many left. What are you going to do? Feng Wu was worried as well. Why did Princess Rao have so many spiritual overlords under her command? Had she summoned all the spiritual overlords she could summon? Seeing the smoke rising into the air, Feng Wu smiled. I may have an idea. Is that so? Little Phoenix asked Feng Wu curiously, tell me. Feng Wu smiled. She had prepared a lot of things because she had been keeping an eye on Princess Rao. Had it been somewhere else, she wouldn't have been able to handle all these capable cultivators, but now, she had such a great opportunity. She knew how to get rid of all the spiritual overlords. Thinking about what happened to the Hua and Zhua families, Feng Wu was amazed by herself. She told Little Phoenix, "Make as much noise as you can to stall them. I'll need 10 minutes to set it up." Little Phoenix said, "I'll do my best." After that, Feng Wu ignored what was going on outside and focused on setting up the room. Because she knew that Princess Rao might send assassins here, Feng Wu was prepared. She had set up a formation room in this room a while ago. The tables, chairs, bed frames, bricks, and wooden candlesticks. Feng Wu had carefully set up each corner according to the formation and had concentrated on carving inscriptions. Anyone who stepped into the room would be hit. Feng Wu removed the arm of discipline, powered it up, and put it in the most important position. As for what she was going to do with it, no one knew. Was that all Feng Wu was going to do? Of course, it was more than that. Spiritual overlords were very difficult to handle. Right now, was moving so fast that one couldn't follow her movements. "Princess Rao, why do you have to fight me?" Feng Wu was getting ready when she heard a loud noise outside. The door opened with a thump. What on earth was going on here? The spiritual overlords outside were astonished. 4 spiritual overlords were standing in front of Feng Wu, and the other 2 had been lured away by Little Phoenix. The 4 spiritual overlords looked at one another in bewilderment. They couldn't understand why the door would open so suddenly. "Don't let her get away." All 4 of them had their faces covered by a cloth so that no one would see their faces. The head of the 4 gestured at the others to move forward. They filed into Feng Wu's room. Chapter 38-24. Did you meet him? 4. They filed into Feng Wu's room. They frowned when they entered because they sensed something different. The door was suddenly closed behind them. Was that the wind? They looked over their shoulders and saw that the door was tightly shut. The only light came from a tiny gap next to the window, through which the silver moonlight shone. The leader of the team was the tallest, and he made a hand gesture. Hence, the 4 of them surrounded the bed in 4 directions. They eyed the bed with contempt. According to the information they received, they were going to assassinate a person without any spiritual essence and take a weapon. That was all. They couldn't for the life of them figure out why the 6 of them were sent here for such a simple task. What was the princess thinking? What they didn't know was that Princess Rao had sent all of them here not only to rob the treasure but also to intimidate and take revenge on Huyen Yichen. Huyen Yichen had disrespected her, and she couldn't stand it. Since she could command so many people, why not use them? The duvet was rolled up on the bed, and someone was lying inside. The leader nodded at the others, then walked up to the bed. He always liked to kill with a blade. However, the next second, when he lifted the duvet, he realized. Empty. Where was she? At that critical moment, there was a slight noise outside. The window had closed at some point, and no light could get in. All 4 of them had strange looks on their faces, but no one could see their faces clearly in the dark. The target is missing. They were spiritual elders, but they let Feng Wu get away? That was preposterous. Let's go. The man in the lead found the room so strange that he wanted to retreat. However, he suddenly couldn't move his leg. Because it suddenly became very quiet. He felt like a fetus was in his mother's womb. They were all smiling happily. They seemed to be immersed in their dreams. Feng Wu didn't go out. Instead, she stayed in the room that was dozens of square meters in size. She hid quietly on the roof beam and waited for the poison to take effect. Feng Wu had used poison. She didn't have much toxin with her, but these people had used such a potent powder. Hence, Feng Wu was able to quickly create a hallucinogen based on the powder, which turned things around for them. A spiritual overlord was human after all. It was inevitable that they would be affected as well. Kiddo. A voice came from outside. It was Huyen Yichen. Feng Wu saw that the spiritual overlords almost woke up. She gritted her teeth and increased the dosage. As for herself, she opened the door in the dark and quietly showed Huyen Yichen in. Huyen Yichen let out a breath of relief when he saw Feng Wu. He almost thought that Feng Wu was dead. Before he could say anything, Feng Wu tugged at him and quietly sat him down on the beam. The moment Feng Wu opened the door, Huyen Yichen saw the 4 people inside and was astonished. Chapter 3825 Assassination in the Dark 1. Huyen Yichen almost cried out. Feng Wu covered his mouth in time. If Feng Wu didn't cover his mouth in time and let him shout, all her effort would go to waste. How? Huyen Yichen was astonished. Feng Wu lowered her voice. Do you know them? Huyen Yichen nodded immediately. I've met them before. After a pause, he lowered his voice. I saw them at Princess Rao's place. Why are there so many spiritual overlords here? Feng Wu was confused. Isn't there any outside your room? Huyen Yichen shook his head. No. Feng Wu thought that the spiritual overlords guarding Huyen Yichen's door had been lured away by Little Phoenix. They were still talking when Feng Wu heard Little Phoenix's anxious voice. I can't hold on much longer. It was talking to Feng Wu through her mind, so only Feng Wu could hear it. Little Phoenix was only a bird that hadn't reached the peak of the spiritual overlord stage yet, and it was already a miracle that it had lasted this long. She had to take care of these 4 people first. Feng Wu didn't have any spiritual essence with her at the moment, nor did she have the arm. She couldn't break his defense. One had to be a spiritual overlord to do that. Feng Wu looked over her shoulder at Huyen Yichen. What's your level? Huyen Yichen said to Feng Wu in a low voice. I'm still a little bit away from the spiritual overlord stage. Feng Wu asked, how close? Huyen Yichen said, I'm a level 8 spiritual lord now, and it'll be years before I become a spiritual overlord. Feng Wu said, I'll help you. Huyen Yichen asked, what? He was utterly confused. How was the girl going to help him? She didn't have any spiritual essence at all. However, Huyen Yichen saw Feng Wu beckoning at a spiritual overlord in the dark. Why did you bring him here? I'm only a level 8 spiritual lord. I can't handle him. Huyen Yichen was anxious. But Feng Wu wasn't worried at all. She summoned the unconscious spiritual overlord and said to Huyen Yichen, of all the people here, he's the only one with the same element as you. Feng Wu whispered a cultivation technique to Huyen Yichen. Got it? Despite his anxiety, Huyen Yichen still had a good memory, so he nodded at Feng Wu. But Feng Wu said, kill him before he wakes up. Huyen Yichen said with a long face, but we can't break his defense. Spiritual lords were no match for spiritual overlords. However, before Huyen Yichen could complain, Feng Wu waved her hand, and the arm appeared in her hand. Huyen Yichen's eyes lit up when he saw the arm of discipline. The arm! Feng Wu nodded. Can you break their defense now? Huyen Yichen said excitedly, I can do that. After that, Huyen Yichen quickly put on the arm of discipline. Feng Wu's original plan was to let the spiritual overlords activate the arm at last and let it kill them. However, it would be too time-consuming and wouldn't have a high chance of succeeding. Since Huyen Yichen was here, Feng Wu let him do it for her. In the darkness, a sharp dagger appeared at the tip of the arm. It pierced the spiritual overlord's heart without making a sound. Chapter 3826 Assassination in the Dark 2. The moment his heart was pierced, the spiritual overlord woke up from the pain. His eyes snapped open in the darkness. They were as sharp as ice. He immediately saw the 2 people in front of him. One was a teenager with a strange arm, and the other was an ordinary-looking girl. The look on his face was so ferocious that Huyen Yichen, who had never killed anyone before, was baffled. Feng Wu gave Huyen Yichen a nudge. His throat. Huyen Yichen realized what had happened. At the same time, the spiritual overlord realized that someone was trying to kill him. As for his friends, the spiritual overlord was shocked when he saw that his 3 teammates were all wandering off. Although he didn't know what had happened, he could tell that there was something wrong with the 2 teenagers. And that girl was their target tonight. At that thought, the spiritual overlord struck out, But it was too late. He had underestimated the speed of the arm. Seeing that Huyen Yichen didn't have time to react, Feng Wu pressed a key spot on the arm. She then heard the sound of something ripping through the air. With a whoosh, a thin needle flew out of the arm and pierced the forehead of the spiritual overlord less than a meter in front of them. Out of all the places, the area between the eyebrows was the core of the mind. The needle pierced his forehead and reached his brain. The needle Feng Wu made wasn't just any sewing needle. Spiritual overlords could survive ordinary needles as long as their cerebrovascular vessels weren't injured. However, the needles Feng Wu had made for the arm were known as burst needles. What was a burst needle? As the name suggested, the needle would explode when it entered the brain. When a capable cultivator cultivated, they might be able to defend their head, but there was nothing they could do to their brain. Therefore, when the spiritual overlord threw a punch at Feng Wu and when Huyen Yichen shielded Feng Wu with his arms, everything seemed to freeze at that moment. Huyen Yichen didn't feel the pain he had expected, so he slowly opened his eyes. What he saw was a giant figure standing in front of him. The man's eyes were wide open, his body was stiff, and he didn't move a muscle. One couldn't tell if it was alive or dead. Huyen Yichen waved his hand in front of the man's face, but there was no reaction. He poked the man and saw that he fell backward. Before the dead spiritual overlord fell to the ground, Feng Wu reached out to catch him. If she was a little bit slower, the sound would have woken up the other 3 spiritual overlords. Feng Wu was a little bit too late, so she tried to use herself as a cushion. When Huyen Yichen realized what was going on, he grabbed the spiritual overlord and stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. He spoke very quietly, fearing that he might wake up the other spiritual overlords. "He's dead." Feng Wu silenced him with a wave of her hand. Huyen Yichen was speechless. Dead? The spiritual overlord was dead just like that. Spiritual overlords were already very powerful in the northern Yen kingdom, and only a handful of them could be found in the empire. However, the ugly girl had just killed them. Feng Wu had Huyen Yichen move the spiritual overlord to a corner of the room. Chapter 38-27, Assassination in the Dark, 3. Huyen Yichen lowered his voice. "Is he really dead?" Feng Wu nodded. Huyen Yichen scratched his head. "Did I do that?" Feng Wu nodded again. Huyen Yichen said, "But, although I've stabbed him in the heart, his defense is too strong. The blade didn't completely destroy his heart. With the capability of a spiritual overlord, it shouldn't be that easy for him to." He looked at Feng Wu in bewilderment. "I saw you shoot a needle, but wasn't it just one needle? Was it that effective?" Instead of answering Huyen Yichen, Feng Wu pointed at the other assassins. "There are 3 more to go." Huyen Yichen stared at Feng Wu in disbelief and stammered, "Are you going to?" Feng Wu nodded. "Just repeat what you've done." Huyen Yichen said, But I'm not their match." Just then Huyen Yichen saw something incredible. Crouching down, Feng Wu searched the spiritual overlord's head for something. She stuffed something half-transparent into Huyen Yichen's head. Arg! Huyen Yichen felt a stabbing pain in his head and almost burst into tears. He didn't have time to ask any questions. There was a flash of white light, and a lot of things rushed into his head so fast that he almost couldn't take them all. It didn't take Huyen Yichen long to come out of the illusion. He turned to Feng Wu with wide-open eyes. "Wu, you know the soul-absorbing technique." Feng Wu glanced at him. "It's not that." Huyen Yichen said, "What is it, then? How could you extract his soul and stuff it in my head?" Feng Wu shrugged and asked, "How do you feel?" Huyen Yichen said, "I feel like I've comprehended a lot of things about the spiritual overlord stage." All of a sudden, Feng Wu asked, "Can you activate the spiritual overlord's power now?" Huyen Yichen said, "Maybe." While Huyen Yichen was mumbling, Feng Wu summoned a second spiritual overlord. She then turned to Huyen Yichen and gestured at him. Huyen Yichen was eager to try. He wanted to see how capable he was. It wasn't difficult to do the same thing again. Huyen Yichen killed the second spiritual overlord as soon as the latter woke up. Huyen Yichen was ecstatic. He looked at Feng Wu in excitement. I. Meanwhile, Feng Wu was looking at the incense that had almost burnt out. Once the incense was burnt out, those men would wake up. At that thought, Feng Wu told Huyen Yichen in a hurry, "Quickly! We don't have enough time." Huyen Yichen nodded. He was able to kill spiritual overlords because they were in an illusion. Although he didn't know why they were in that illusion, he and the girl would be dead when they woke up. At that thought, before Feng Wu could summon the spiritual overlord, Huyen Yichen had put on the arm of discipline. Luckily, the arm was a semi-divine weapon that could break through the defense of spiritual overlords. Moreover, his comprehension had reached the level of a spiritual overlord, so he was able to exert more power. Before long, Huyen Yichen killed the remaining 2 spiritual overlords. Chapter 38-28, Assassination in the Dark, 4. Seeing the dead spiritual overlords in the room, Huyen Yichen didn't know what to do. He stared at Feng Wu in bewilderment. I killed 4 spiritual overlords? Oh my god! Huyen Yichen felt that he was only a level 8 spiritual lord and was too far away from these spiritual overlords. However, the 4 spiritual overlords lying in the room had really been killed by him. I feel like I'm dreaming. Huyen Yichen still couldn't believe it. Just then, Little Phoenix cried out outside. Although it had the invisibility spell, the peak spiritual overlords were very capable. Moreover, there were 2 peak spiritual overlords and 3 intermediate spiritual overlords outside. We finally killed them all. Let's get out of here. Huyen Yichen thought that everything was going to be alright, so he turned to leave with Feng Wu. However, Feng Wu only gave him a strange look and told him the truth. What? Huyen Yichen was so frightened that he almost fell to the ground. Staring at Feng Wu, he said nervously, there are still 3 intermediate spiritual overlords and 2 peak spiritual overlords. Feng Wu nodded. Huyen Yichen was astonished. Are all the capable cultivators of Northern Yen here tonight? Feng Wu shrugged. Maybe. Huyen Yichen asked, are we going to die? Feng Wu said, no. Huyen Yichen said, but there are so many of them. My grandpa is amazing, but he's only good at forging weapons. There's nothing he can do. Listening to the noise outside, Feng Wu frowned and asked Huyen Yichen, have you delivered the letter I told you to deliver? Huyen Yichen said, of course. I've sent it out in secret. I was worried that Princess Rao would send someone to spy on us, so I told the person to sneak into the eldest prince's residence. Feng Wu nodded and murmured, by now, his men should be here. Huyen Yichen asked, whose men? Feng Wu said, the eldest prince's. Huyen Yichen almost choked on his own spit. He stared at Feng Wu in bewilderment. Whose people? Feng Wu said grumpily, Princess Rao has a troop, and there's no way that the eldest prince, who's competing with her for the throne, doesn't have one. By right, his people should be here by now. Huyen Yichen said, you're just an ugly girl. Who do you think you are? How dare you order a prince to help you? He'll never listen to you. Feng Wu said, if I give you the arm of discipline if you have a troop, and if Princess Rao is the enemy, will you send out your men? Huyen Yichen said, of course. Feng Wu said, there you go. Huyen Yichen said, but how did you know that Princess Rao would send someone to kill you tonight? Feng Wu smiled. She may not want to kill me, but she'll definitely send someone to take the arm away. Huyen Yichen agreed. She always has to have everything she wants. The arm of discipline was the first time she couldn't have something. With her temperament, she would have to take it, but you know her really well. Feng Wu thought to herself, if I don't know her well, I'll be dead by now. Just then, they heard the sound of a fierce battle outside. Reinforcements are here. Huyen Yichen looked at Feng Wu in excitement and took her to look out of the window. Look, someone is fighting Princess Rao's men. It's a fierce battle. Chapter 3829, The Eldest Prince, 1. Feng Wu followed his gaze and saw what he was looking at. A short distance away, two capable cultivators were fighting Princess Rao's men. The two of them were fighting peak spiritual overlords, which meant that they were equally capable. Are there only two of them? Huyan Yichen grew anxious. There were still quite a few spiritual overlords left. Apart from the two that were fighting, there were three more. However, the three of them were slightly weaker. They were intermediate spiritual overlords. Even so, they were still very difficult to handle. They were spiritual overlords after all. Just then, they heard someone screaming outside. It was Little Phoenix. Thanks to its invisibility spell, the bird had been able to make several spiritual overlords run around outside. Otherwise, Feng Wu would have been dead by now. Come in, Feng Wu reminded Little Phoenix. You'd better take a spiritual overlord inside with you. We won't be able to handle them all for a while. Little Phoenix was astonished when Feng Wu told it that they had killed all four spiritual overlords. They're really dead? You're not lying, are you? You're a good-for-nothing, and Huyan Yichen isn't capable at all. Did you really do it? Feng Wu said grumpily, although I don't have any spiritual essence now, I still have other skills. Feng Wu was good at everything from alchemy to weapon refinement, medicine refinement, and formation. Little Phoenix agreed with her. Master Mu's pupil was anything but weak. She had just killed 4 spiritual overlords when she was still a good-for-nothing. That was quite an achievement. 3 men are chasing me. Wait for me. I'll take one of them with me. After talking to Feng Wu, Little Phoenix started making the people chase it. It didn't take long for it to come back with one of them. Little Phoenix said to Feng Wu, "You can have that one. I'll bring the other one back in a minute. Hurry up." After that, Little Phoenix left the spiritual overlord behind and flew out of the room. The spiritual overlord was brought in by Little Phoenix, and before he knew it, the bird was out of sight. He was about to leave the room when the door closed with a loud bang. The spiritual overlord was dazed for a moment. Before he knew it, he was sucked into the spell. Together with the formation Feng Wu had set up, his head spun, and he couldn't think straight. Feng Wu glanced at Huyan Yichen. Huyan Yichen nodded. Hence, when the spiritual overlord fell into an illusion, Huyan Yichen struck out with the arm of discipline. There were needles, daggers, and other things on the arm. Feng Wu had installed quite a few gadgets. Before the spiritual overlord could react, he was struck by the arm's hidden weapon in the area between the eyebrows, his throat, and his heart. The spiritual overlord screamed. When he came back to himself, he saw a young man in front of him, and he had 3 fatal wounds. Phew! Before he could finish, he heard a voice outside. 15? Are you there? Chapter 3830, The Eldest Prince, 2. As it turned out, the person severely injured by the arm was known as 15. That was probably his ranking. Feng Wu gave Huyan Yichen a warning look. Huyan Yichen realized that now wasn't the time to be baffled. Thump! The arm struck out. The hidden weapons were only add-ons, and its most lethal force relied on the punch. 15. The spiritual overlord kicked the door open and rushed into the room. 15. His eyes turned bloodshot red when he saw what was going on. For he saw 15, his friend, lying on the ground and staring at him with wide-open eyes. Arg! He bellowed and spared no effort. The bellow of an intermediate spiritual overlord wasn't that easy to withstand. Earlier, the spiritual overlords didn't dare to make too much noise to disturb the others because they were assassins. However, things had turned against them and they couldn't care less. The spiritual overlord bellowed, and the roof of Feng Wu's room was lifted off the ground. Feng Wu had borrowed the darkness of the night to set up the formation. Now that the darkness had been overturned, half of the formation was destroyed. As if that wasn't enough, the spiritual overlord bellowed again. Even the wall of the room Feng Wu was in had been blown away. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. That sound wave was incredible. Luckily, Feng Wu had prepared for this and had backed off beforehand. Otherwise, she would have been blown away by now. When the entire room was blown away, Feng Wu's formation probably wouldn't work anymore. However, the spiritual overlord finally saw what was going on. He drew in his breath. Oh God! He wanted to scream because there were 5 dead bodies. 5 dead spiritual overlords were lying side by side, and each one had been severely injured. Looking up, he didn't see anyone, but he saw 2 figures running down the slope. Stop! The spiritual overlord bellowed and charged at them. He moved as fast as a streak of lightning. Fearing that Feng Wu would get hurt, Huyan Yichen pushed her away. He then turned to face the spiritual overlord. Thump! The man knocked Huyan Yichen away with one strike, and his back smashed into the wall. The next second, the wall collapsed. The spiritual overlord didn't even look at Feng Wu. All his attention was on Huyan Yichen. Huyan Yichen was wearing the arm, which was their target this time. He slowly walked toward Huyan Yichen with a cold look in his eyes. Blue veins popped on his forehead. All 5 of his friends were dead. Die! The spiritual overlord bent down and grabbed Huyan Yichen by the throat. Huyan Yichen raised his arm and struck down at the spiritual overlord. However, although Huyan Yichen was already a spiritual overlord, H's was still a spiritual king in terms of his capability. Therefore, his opponent was only slightly injured and was going to throttle him. Chapter 38-31, The Eldest Prince, 3. Just then, there was a loud thump, and a spear pierced the spiritual overlord from behind. Cough, cough. Huyan Yichen was almost strangled. His vision went dark, and he thought he was going to die. Luckily, looking up, he wanted to know who had saved him, but... Grandpa! Huyan Yichen cried out. It was indeed old Huyan. As soon as Huyan Yichen pushed Feng Wu away, Feng Wu knew what he was going to do. He wanted to stall for time. He knew perfectly well that he was no match for an intermediate spiritual overlord, but he still pushed her away without hesitation. She was going to call Little Phoenix, but the bird was too busy killing the last spiritual overlord to do anything. Feng Wu smacked her own head. How could she forget? She went to wake Huyan up with some medicine. Therefore, Huyan Yichen was amazed when he saw his grandfather. Grandpa, you... An idea struck Huyan Yichen, and he looked sad. Huyan threw a dirty look at Huyan Yichen and left with a darkened face. Huyan Yichen looked at Feng Wu. Did you bring my grandfather here? Feng Wu nodded. Huyan Yichen sighed. Grandpa is mad. Feng Wu was confused. Why is he so angry? Huyan Yichen sighed and said, To save me, my grandfather made an oath in front of the Queen and Princess Rao that he would never use his spiritual essence again. He has broken his promise. Feng Wu looked at Huyan Yichen in bewilderment. Most of the people here are sent by Princess Rao. She's only bullying your grandpa because he can't do anything. If we don't do anything, she'll get what she wants. That's so stupid. Huyan Yichen agreed with her. Feng Wu said, When your grandfather made that oath, was it because of your sister? Did you go after Princess Rao? Huyan Yichen looked at Feng Wu in amazement. Was she even human? How did she know that? Feng Wu said, But look, Princess Rao broke the rule first. So what if your grandfather broke his oath? He can't just stand there and watch while they try to kill us. That's not keeping his promise. That's called being pedantic and stupid. Huyan Yichen scrambled to his feet. That's true. Before he could finish, Huyan Yichen covered his head and drew in his breath. Feng Wu glanced at him. Can't hold it anymore? Huyan Yichen nodded. Iron Tower, who had finally shown up, said anxiously, Young master, let me carry you. After that, he was going to carry Huyan Yichen toward the toilet. No, it's not that, Huyan Yichen waved his hands and said, I'm going to make a breakthrough. Huyan Yichen wanted to find a quiet place to cultivate and make a breakthrough, but the entire shop was in a mess, and he couldn't find a quiet. But, moreover, he couldn't stankle it anymore. He said to Feng Wu, Protect me. After that, he sat down cross-legged and started cultivating, ready to make a breakthrough. Iron Tower watched this in astonishment. His young master was going to make a breakthrough? What happened while he was sleeping? Chapter 38-32, The Eldest Prince 4. By then, Little Phoenix had finally taken care of the last spiritual overlord. It was stumbling toward Feng Wu until it landed on her palm. Seeing the blood on Little Phoenix's feathers, Feng Wu asked sympathetically, "Are you hurt?" "What?" Little Phoenix waved her off. "Don't worry about it. It's been years since I fought to my heart's content. That was so satisfying." Seeing that Little Phoenix was in a good mood, Feng Wu was relieved to see that it was all right. The situation was almost under control. There were 7 spiritual overlords in total, and 5 of them were killed by Feng Wu and Huyan Yichen. 1 was killed by Old Huyan, and the other was killed by Little Phoenix. The remaining 2 were at the peak of the spiritual overlord stage, and they had already fought their way into another dimension. Otherwise, the damage would be too severe. His Majesty would hold them responsible. Just then, a group of people slowly walked in. It was a tall, handsome, and well-defined young man, followed by several spiritual overlord guards. Spiritual overlord guards. Feng Wu immediately recognized the person. He looked right into Feng Wu's eyes and smiled. The King of Refinery? He stared at Feng Wu with a smile on his face. The letter Feng Wu gave him was signed by the King of Refinery. If it hadn't been for that title, he wouldn't have come all the way here. "Your Royal Highness?" Feng Wu stood a meter away from him and smiled as well. Right now, Feng Wu was neither servile nor overbearing, and she was very calm. She wasn't as flustered as the others when they saw the prince. The Crown Prince looked at the ugly girl, followed her gaze, and saw the dead bodies on the ground. They were all his sister's right-hand men. The look on the prince's face was even more cheerful. He walked up to Feng Wu and smiled. "Young lady, did you write that letter?" Feng Wu nodded indifferently. The prince asked, "Did you kill them as well?" Feng Wu raised an eyebrow. "Do you think I'm good enough to do that?" The prince could sense that Feng Wu didn't have any spiritual essence. He waved his hand and gestured at Feng Wu to sit opposite him. No one knew what Feng Wu and the prince talked about. All they saw was that Feng Wu and the prince were enjoying their conversation. Iron Tower was surprised. To him, the prince was cold and unapproachable, and even his young master didn't dare to act recklessly in front of him. However, this girl, she was sitting on the same level as the prince and wouldn't give in. That was impressive. What Feng Wu didn't know was that old Huyan, who had left a long time ago, was also observing her in secret and was surprised by what she did. However, he soon convinced himself. A weapon refiner that could forge a semi-divine weapon had to be very capable. The prince was only a junior to him. What was so strange about this girl interacting with him as an equal? Just then, there was a rumbling sound. What was that? Everyone looked in the direction of the sound and saw that Huyan Yichen was absorbing the spiritual essence. By then, he had absorbed all the spiritual essence and slowly opened his eyes. The moment he saw Huyan Yichen, the prince frowned, and he jumped to his feet. Chapter 38-33, I'm a Spiritual Overlord, 1. He walked toward Huyan Yichen, moving so fast that the others didn't have time to react. Before they knew it, he was crouching down in front of Huyan Yichen. "Yichen." He waved his hand in front of Huyan Yichen's face. Before Huyan Yichen could react, he waved his hand again. This time, Huyan Yichen finally came back to himself. He stared at the prince but didn't know what to say. The prince spoke first. "Yichen, did you make a breakthrough?" After all, the prince was a prince of a major kingdom and had seen much of the world. Hence, he soon calmed down. Judging by his trembling voice, he wasn't all that calm. Huyan Yichen nodded. "Yes." Seeing that Huyan Yichen was in a trance-like state, the prince couldn't help but ask, "What level are you now?" Huyan Yichen blushed when he heard that. He jumped to his feet and looked very excited. Huyan Yichen didn't dare to speak. He looked around the room. Old Huyan was standing a short distance away. Seeing the look in Huyan Yichen's eyes, the old man stroked his beard. The boy had come to beg him, hadn't he? But, after looking around, Huyan Yichen fixed his gaze on Feng Wu. Ugly girl! Huyan Yichen ran toward Feng Wu and almost threw himself at her. Luckily, Feng Wu reacted in time and dodged the attack. However, Huyan Yichen was still very excited. He turned around and stared at Feng Wu. Did you see that? I made a breakthrough. I'm a spiritual overlord now. Spiritual overlord now. Haha. That was true. With Huyan Yichen's cultivation level, which was a level 8 spiritual king, he would consider himself lucky if he rose to the spiritual overlord stage in a few years. If he wasn't lucky enough, he might stay that way for the rest of his life. However, he had just made a breakthrough. How could he not be excited? Feng Wu nodded grumpily. However, Huyan Yichen was still very excited. He ran toward the prince and spun the ladder around in circles. Ha! I'm a spiritual overlord now. I'm a spiritual overlord now. The prince smiled bitterly and rubbed his nose. However, Huyan Yichen wouldn't stop talking. It's all Little Feng's doing. She enabled me to make a breakthrough. She's amazing. Before the prince could react, Huyan Yichen was already running toward the old man. His voice reached his grandfather before he could reach the ladder. Grandpa, 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 I'm a spiritual overlord now. Your grandson is a spiritual overlord. Huyan Yichen ran around the old man in circles in excitement. Old Huyan wanted to slap him to wake him up, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Because he knew that the little girl died in Huyan Yichen's arms. Back then, she said that when her brother reached the spiritual overlord stage, he would be very capable, and he would be able to save her. Old Huyan couldn't bring himself to think about it as expected. Huyan Yichen, who had been so pleased with himself a moment ago. Chapter 38-34, 11M A Spiritual Overlord, 2. He bent over, rested his hands on his thighs, and burst into tears. I'm already a spiritual overlord. But where am I going to save my sister? Where? Seeing this, Feng Wu walked up to Huyan Yichen and patted him on the shoulder. However, Huyan Yichen looked like a drowning man clutching at his last straw. He wrapped his arms around Feng Wu, buried his head in her chest, and burst into tears again. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. The teenager was the type that would laugh and cry whenever he felt like it. He didn't try to hide his true nature at all. He was so adorable. However, if Jun Linyuan saw him like this, he would be killed. Feng Wu tried to pry his hands off her. However, Huyan Yichen was like an octopus. He wrapped his arms around her and couldn't stop crying. Feng Wu looked up at the sky and met the prince's eyes. Jun Linyuan found Feng Wu's behavior amusing. The way she sighed just then was so amusing. That was to say, Huyan Yichen still didn't know who the girl was. Was he the only one in northern Yen who knew who she really was? The prince was elated. Feng Wu turned to the prince for help with a pleading look on her face. He walked up to Huyan Yichen, grabbed him, and dragged him away from Feng Wu. Feng Wu nodded gratefully at the prince with a long face, but the latter only smiled. Deep down, he found the girl very amusing. He didn't know that legendary teenage girls could be so adorable. Are you done crying? The prince picked up Huyan Yichen and asked in resignation. Huyan Yichen was still sobbing and didn't say a word. The prince heaved a long sigh and said affectionately, "Haven't I told you already? I'll take revenge for you." However, Huyan Yichen stretched out his arm and showed off his biceps excitedly. "I'll take my revenge myself. I'm a spiritual overlord now." The prince was speechless when he saw all the spiritual overlords lying on the ground. He used to think that spiritual overlords were very capable, but when he saw the dead bodies on the ground, he couldn't believe his eyes. Meanwhile, Huyan Yichen ignored the prince and ran toward Feng Wu. Sister Feng, you're going to help me, aren't you?" He gave Feng Wu a pleading look. Feng Wu had a bad feeling. She frowned and asked, "Help you with what?" Huyan Yichen said in a serious tone, "Avenge my sister." Feng Wu pointed at the prince. Didn't he say he was going to help you? Go find him. What good can a good-for-nothing with no spiritual essence do? The prince nodded. That was right. He was the heir to the throne, but instead of asking for his help, Huyen Yichen was talking to a good-for-nothing. Although she was a genius, she was still a good-for-nothing. However, Huyen Yichen grabbed Feng Wu's hand and said earnestly, I'm begging you. You're the only one who can kill that girl. That was to say. Feng Wu looked at the prince involuntarily and saw that his face had darkened. Huyen Yichen was openly despising the prince, and he was going to drag her down with him. Chapter 38-35. The Patriarch 1. Since this was Northern Yan's territory, she had to show the prince some respect. Feng Wu shot a warning glance at Huyen Yichen, but the clueless teenager only replied in a sincere tone, It's true. You're the only one who can handle that girl. His Royal Highness can't. If he could, he would have taken revenge for me all these years. Why wait until now? That did make sense. Feng Wu looked at the prince involuntarily. As expected, the crown prince's face was darker than a stormy sky. Feng Wu asked, How can I do that? However, Huyen Yichen said matter-of-factly, Isn't there a saying in the Junwo Empire that evil people will be punished by evil people? Princess Rao is exceptionally evil, but you're worse than her. You're the only one who can do that. I have faith in you. Feng Wu was dumbfounded. The prince pointed at Huyen Yichen and laughed until he was in tears. Huyen Yichen looked at the prince in bewilderment. Had he said something wrong? The spiritual overlords brought by the crown prince all had strange looks in their eyes. The eldest prince was a taciturn man who seldom spoke. He only spoke a little when he saw Huyen Yichen, but he had never laughed like this before. At that thought, they couldn't help but dart another look at Feng Wu, trying to figure out who the girl was that could make the crown prince so agitated. The crown prince looked curiously at Feng Wu and said teasingly, I didn't know you were such a villain. Sorry about that. Feng Wu waved her hands. It takes one to know one. Huyen Yichen looked eagerly at Feng Wu, who said grumpily, Go away. Consolidate your cultivation level now, or you'll be in a lot of trouble. Yes. Huyen Yichen followed Feng Wu's order and went to cultivate to consolidate his foundation. The eldest prince and old Huyen looked at each other and shook their heads with wry smiles. Huyen Yichen had never been so obedient. Old Huyen left on his own. The prince sat down opposite Feng Wu and smiled at her. What are you going to do now? Feng Wu stared at him and threw the question back at him. What are you going to do now? The crown prince said, You've killed Princess Rao's capable subordinate. What do you think she'll do when the sun rises? Was he threatening her? Feng Wu smiled. I'm just a good-for-nothing with no spiritual essence. How can I possibly kill these people? No matter how highly Princess Rao thinks of me, she won't think that way. The prince frowned. As expected, Feng Wu patted his left arm with a smile. Your Royal Highness, since you're here, shouldn't you be protecting our shop? Didn't you kill those people? The prince was speechless. Feng Wu grinned. Don't you agree? The prince rubbed his forehead. So, you were going to make me the scapegoat when you sent that letter? Feng Wu nodded. I'm too weak to take the blame. She's your competitor, and you can't wait to see her dead. What's wrong with taking the blame? The prince looked at Feng Wu in resignation and said, Miss Feng Wu, you're indeed a legendary girl. You've planned everything from the very beginning. Chapter 38-36. The Patriarch 2. Feng Wu smiled. What do you mean by that? I'm helping you get rid of the enemies. Princess Rao has suffered a lot in this battle. Please don't tell me that you're not happy about it. The prince didn't know what to say. Of course, he was happy. If he won, he would win the entire kingdom, but this was the first time that someone had pointed it out. He stared at Feng Wu and said indifferently, Miss Feng Wu, are you always so frank? Feng Wu shrugged. Not really. Your Royal Highness, you're the only one who knows who I really am. The prince had been leaning back in his chair, but now he leaned forward, crossed his fingers, and stared at Feng Wu. Aren't you worried that I'll hand you over to Princess Rao? Feng Wu smiled. You won't. The prince narrowed his eyes on Feng Wu. Why not? Feng Wu leaned back on the bamboo chair and looked around the room. She then turned to the prince and said, I could kill these spiritual overlords without spiritual essence. What do you think of my capability when I recover my spiritual essence? The look on the prince's face changed. Feng Wu went on. Plus, who am I in the Junwo Empire? Who's my patron? Who's he in the Junwo Empire? Your Royal Highnesses are well informed. I don't think I need to explain everything. The prince nodded. He had been keeping an eye on Feng Wu's relationship with Jun Linyuan, for Jun Linyuan's marriage was too important. Feng Wu smiled again. Befriending me is as good as winning the Junwo Empire's friendship. The prince said indifferently, the friendship of the Junwo Empire is great, but not having it won't matter much. Feng Wu shook her head with a smile. It's true that the friendship of the Junwo Empire won't affect your accession to the throne, but what if your competitors suddenly gain the support of other countries? The prince narrowed his eyes. Are you saying? Feng Wu pointed to the northeast. The crown prince asked, the Dongsang kingdom? Feng Wu nodded. The prince stared at Feng Wu with eyes as deep as the ocean. He didn't ask Feng Wu how she knew because he knew that Feng Wu was telling the truth. Interesting. The prince stared at Feng Wu and suddenly smiled. What do you want? Feng Wu stared at him and asked earnestly, you want to hear the truth? The prince said, yes. Feng Wu nodded and said directly, I need to see your patriarch. The prince almost choked on his tea. He immediately put down his cup and studied Feng Wu with an astonished look on his face. Feng Wu shrugged, not feeling guilty at all. You told me to tell the truth. The prince took a deep breath. Do you know who our patriarch is? Feng Wu asked. Who? Yanba? The prince almost spat out another mouthful of water. Huyan Yanba. No one in their generation dared to mention the name of their patriarch, and they all addressed him as patriarch respectfully. However, to this girl, addressing him as Huyan Yanba was as common as addressing someone of her generation. The prince was almost frightened to death. Just shut up. The prince stared at Feng Wu with a solemn look on his face. You shouldn't address our patriarch by his name. If my father finds out, he'll cut your head off. Chapter 38-37, The Patriarch, 3. Feng Wu asked curiously, does the Emperor of Northern Yen respect Huyan? Ahem, your patriarch very much? The prince was speechless. What are you talking about? Does the Junwo Empire have no respect for your patriarch? Feng Wu didn't answer. Instead, she changed the subject. I need to see him. The prince noticed that Feng Wu didn't say, I want to see him, but, I need to. After a pause, he asked Feng Wu, are you serious? Feng Wu nodded. I need to see him. Rubbing his smooth chin, the prince was lost in his thoughts. To be honest, it's very difficult to see the patriarch. He's so elusive that he may not be in Northern Yen now. Feng Wu said, but he'll be here in 2 weeks. The prince looked at Feng Wu in bewilderment. Why are you so sure? Feng Wu repeated, he has to be here. Seeing how serious Feng Wu was, the prince realized that she must know something. Fine, let's just say that he's in Northern Yen, but it's still very difficult to meet him. The prince smiled bitterly. Actually, it'll be easier if you go to Raoshi because the patriarch has been kind to her. Feng Wu asked, really? The crown prince nodded. It's true. He once said that Raoshi looked a lot like an old friend of his. Maybe that's why. Who knows? But Raoshi can indeed enter this spiritual concealing tower. If it wasn't for the fact that the patriarch likes Raoshi, a woman like her would never have been able to compete with me for the throne. My father still values the patriarch's opinion more than anything else. Seeing that Feng Wu was honest, the prince was very straightforward. Feng Wu nodded and said affirmatively, I'm sure you can figure it out. The prince smiled bitterly and didn't reply. He suddenly asked, can you tell me why you want to see the patriarch? Although I'm a prince, The patriarch's safety is at stake, and my father won't leave it alone. I'm taking too big a risk. After some thought, Feng Wu decided to tell the crown prince, "Have you heard of the primary heaven pill?" The crown prince nodded. The pill is a body-strengthening elixir the patriarch prepared for Raoshi. She hasn't been well since she was little, so It's mine. Feng Wu spoke before the prince could finish. The prince was baffled and stared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu nodded and repeated, "The pill is mine." The prince was shocked. What happened today had exceeded his expectations several times. The girl in front of him was a legend. "Did you just say," the prince swallowed, "the pill is yours?" Had it been anyone else, he would have kicked them out already. However, this was Feng Wu, and Feng Wu had made her name in the Junwo Empire. Not to mention what Feng Wu had just done, the prince couldn't help but believe her. Feng Wu nodded and didn't say another word. The prince leaned back in his chair and heaved a sigh. "If that's true then, can I make a guess?" The prince sat up straight again and leaned forward. The patriarch doesn't dote on Raoshi as much as she claims. Of course, you know that people like us don't like to spread the news ourselves. All we need to do is to take advantage of the situation and send out a signal. Chapter 38:38, The Patriarch 4. Tilting her head, Feng Wu gave it some thought and said, "I don't know if your patriarch really dotes on Raoshi, but what I'm sure of is that the primary heaven pill is mine. Moreover, your patriarch only has the safe custody of the pill, not the right to use it." The prince looked at Feng Wu in amazement. Feng Wu nodded solemnly. The prince took a deep breath. "You're so unfathomable." He was scared. Feng Wu grinned. "So, are you willing to work with me?" She smiled and extended her hand. Closing his eyes, the prince racked his brain. Every man for himself. He would never help Feng Wu for no reason, for the two of them hadn't been emotionally involved before. Therefore, the only thing he cared about now was his personal gain. The prince opened his eyes, which were as clear as bottomless pools and as sharp as blades. "So, what will you give me if we work together?" Keeping his gaze on Feng Wu, the prince enunciated each word. Feng Wu smiled. "I'm going to give you an opportunity to become the king. Will you take it?" Judging by Feng Wu's tone, he knew that she was going to destroy his rival for him. Raoshi wasn't that easy to handle, especially when she had a patriarch behind her. However, this girl seemed to be very influential. They might as well work together. "Happy working with you." The prince shook Feng Wu's hand. They smiled at each other. Meanwhile, the princess's residence was a mess. Thump, thump, thump. Things kept falling. Outside, Saixia and Muley looked at each other and both saw fear in each other's eyes. The princess they remembered was elegant, unperturbed, and could make other people lose their minds with a smile, but she was smashing things in exasperation now. That was something they had never seen before. "What should we do now?" Muley panicked and asked in a low voice. Saixia waved at her with a straight face, indicating that she should keep her silence. Muley lowered her voice. "But Sister Feiyu is inside. Is something going to happen to her?" Saixia shook her head. Soon, they heard the sound of someone being whipped. Thump, thump, thump. The cracking sounds were so loud that they reminded me of raindrops. With each crack, Muley cringed, and a chill ran down her spine. She covered her ears, but hearing Feiyu's painful voice, Muley thought she was going to have a nervous breakdown. After a long while, she heard the sound of a whip being thrown away. "Come in." A cold voice rang out. Muley shuddered and almost cried out. Saixia threw a dirty look at her and warned her in a low voice. "The princess is venting her anger. Behave yourself if you want to live." Muley nodded nervously. The two of them went inside together. The clean and tidy room was in a mess. There were crumbs everywhere, and there wasn't even enough room to stand on. Among the debris was a person covered in blood. She was lying on her stomach and was covered with cuts and bruises. It was a terrifying scene. Right now, Princess Rao was sitting in front of the dressing table and slowly straightening her makeup. She didn't seem to notice anything. Muley's heart was pounding and she was shaking. She noticed that the one covered in cuts and bruises was none other than Sister Feiyu, who had delivered the news to the princess. Chapter 38-39, The Patriarch, 5. Sister Feiyu was the princess's senior maid, and Muley remembered the day before. Feiyu had chatted with her and told her that the princess was very nice to her. She had earned a lot of money this month and had saved up a little. She was going to send it to her family, but now. Clean this place up. Princess Rao glanced at them, her face as calm as ever. She headed for the door after that. After Princess Rao left, Muley let out a breath of relief. Her forehead was covered with sweat. Finally! My God! Muley heaved a long sigh and said to Tsaixia, "Let's save Sister Feiyu." After that, Muley crouched down and was going to treat her with hemostatic medicine. But Kaishao didn't move. Muley prompted her. "Tsaixia, come here. It's Feiyu." However, Muley couldn't finish her sentence. Because she could feel Feiyu's breath, and the latter was no longer breathing. She anxiously tried to find Feiyu's pulse, but there was nothing. Ah! Muley screamed, rose to her feet, and stumbled back. She suddenly realized that Sister Feiyu was. She's. Muley was so frightened that she couldn't speak. But Kaishao seemed to be very experienced. She found a bag in the corner and put Feiyu in it. Muley watched this with her mouth agape. Soon, Tsaixia stuffed the body in. Looking up, she saw Muley standing there in a trance-like state. She frowned and said in a solemn voice, "Come here and help me." Muley said, "The princess has." Before Muley could finish, Tsaixia cast a stern look at her. "Do you want to become a dead body as well?" Muley said, "No, of course not." Tsaixia said, "Give me a hand, then." Muley said, "Yes, of course." Although she said yes, her hands were shaking violently. Tsaixia sighed inwardly. Tsaixia snorted. "I've been doing this since I was little. Even if I'm not bold enough, I've learned it." Muley's stomach lurched. Tsaixia said she had been used to it since she was little, and Muley suddenly felt like crying. Kaishao suddenly asked, "Xylan will be here soon. You can show her around." "Xylan is coming back. But isn't she dead?" Muley was frightened again, and her face went ghastly pale. As a newbie, she felt that the world had turned upside down. Tsaixia glanced at her. The girl was so naive that she was willing to say a few more words. "Don't you know?" Tsaixia glanced at her. The princess's maids' names never change, but the people using those 4 names will. After that, Tsaixia carried the dead body out of the room and told Muley, "Clean this place up before you come back out." By then, Muley was dumbfounded. Holy crap! What was that supposed to mean? The people using those 4 names could change? Was it what she thought? Muley was so frightened that she fell to the ground. Right now, Feng Wu knew that Princess Rao would be furious, for the prince had done a naughty thing. He sent a letter to invite Princess Rao here to the shop, saying that he had something nice to show her. Chapter 38-40, The Patriarch, 6. Of course, Princess Rao knew what her brother wanted to show her. She wouldn't come, but she would be furious. "Report to the authorities." Huyen Yichen said coldly. "After what they did to our shop, we can't pretend that nothing has happened. Do you think I'm that easy to bully? After what she did to me back then, I won't stand for this." The prince didn't stop him. Hence, Huyen Yichen went to the punishment office and banged on the drum. The punishment office was the judicial department of the empire and was in charge of all the officials of the imperial court and the imperial family. Huyen Yichen had determined that it was Princess Rao's doing, so he came here directly. The punishment office was having a peaceful time. The imperial court had been peaceful recently, and the head of the office had been trying to have a son to inherit the family business. Just then, a servant came to report that the young master of a shop had come to complain. The office head frowned. "It's just a small shop. Why are you so nervous? Get out. But, that's petty shop. Petty shop? Do you mean that petty shop? Master Huyen's shop. Yes. Why didn't you say so earlier? The office head put on his clothes. Apart from being a master refiner, Master Huyen was also a member of the royal family. He also had a title which was quite prominent, although the old man himself never paid much attention to it. When the officers saw Huyen Yichen sitting there, he was even more convinced. The teenager had addressed him as uncle, which was quite affectionate. Ahem. The office head cleared his throat. May I ask who you are and what you're here for? Instead of mentioning Princess Rao, Huyen Yichen feigned a teary voice. Uncle, please help us. Someone tried to assassinate my grandfather and me in our shop last night. We almost got killed. Assassination. Northern Yen had always been a safe place. How could someone try to assassinate the top weapon refiner of the kingdom? Are you all right? How's your grandfather? Master Huyen was the most important figure of the kingdom, and they had to keep him safe. Recalling what Feng Wu had told him, Huyen Yichen made up his mind to give Princess Rao a hard time. He feigned a teary voice and said, My grandpa is badly injured, and he's lying at home with the bodies of the assassins who broke in last night. Sir, please bring us justice. He didn't need to say more. Hence, with a wave of his hand, the office head was going to send one of his most capable men to investigate the case. However, after recalling Master Huyen's status, he said in a hurry, I'll go myself and pay him a visit while I'm at it. He was furious when he saw the half-collapsed shop. That's outrageous. Which thief is so heartless? I'll arrest him and punish him. He had made up his mind that he would make sure that the case was properly investigated, for with how important Master Huyen was to His Majesty, the case would soon reach his ears. However, when he saw the bodies on the ground, he was baffled. The dead bodies didn't look like ordinary people. His most capable subordinate was called Yang Zong, who stared at him in bewilderment and didn't know what to do. The office head gave him a warning glance. Yang Zong looked distressed. Chapter 3841, Investigate 1. Yang Zong looked distressed. However, the office head urged him, check it now. Yang Zong moved closer and whispered in his superior's ear, Sir, all 7 of them are spiritual overlords. Spiritual overlords? Hearing that, the officer almost fell to the ground. Spiritual overlords were all precious treasures of the kingdom, but now. Are you saying that all of them? The officer went ghastly pale. Yang Zong nodded. The officer was astonished. He didn't know what to say. He was in big trouble. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down before turning to Huyen Yichen. Where's your grandfather? He had to talk to the old man. However, Huyen Yichen only said to the officer with a long face, My grandpa is badly injured and shouldn't be disturbed. Please let me know if you need anything. Having no other choice, the officer asked Huyen Yichen tentatively, Are all 7 spiritual overlords? Huyen Yichen looked surprised. Spiritual overlords? No wonder. They're so powerful. My family was almost annihilated last night. The officer looked at Huyen Yichen in bewilderment. 7 spiritual overlords. How did you survive and leave their bodies behind? Only a handful of people in the Northern Yen Kingdom could send 7 spiritual overlords at once. Huyen Yichen said, Luckily, His Royal Highness happened to be in the area, and he had some capable men with him. Otherwise, my grandfather and I would have been dead by now. We could have lost our top weapon refiner. Sir, please look into it. The officer felt a headache coming on. This investigation was going to be very problematic. But what Huyen Yichen said next was, If you can't do it, don't worry. I'll go to His Majesty now. I'm going to report to His Majesty. The officer was speechless. To make it worse, Yang Zong, who had finished examining the body, whispered in the officer's ear, There's a body here. It's Princess Rao's secret guard. A chill ran down the officer's spine as he stared at his subordinate. Yang Zong nodded solemnly. The officer drew in his breath. He had been trying to stay out of the competition between the eldest prince and Princess Rao. Who would have thought that the two of them had reached this stage? However, the Northern Yen Kingdom was the one that was losing power. At that thought, the officer was furious. He said to Huyen Yichen, "This is too big a matter for the punishment office to handle. His Majesty has to do something." All Huyen Yichen wanted was to tell the king about it. Princess Rao had sent someone to assassinate him. He would like to see what the king would say when they caught her red-handed. Huyen Yichen had no idea what Feng Wu and the prince discussed the night before, nor did he know what their plan was. All he knew was that the girl was so awesome that Princess Rao would never be her match. All he needed to do was follow the girl's order. That was what Huyen Yichen thought, but he put on a sad face. "Since we have to report this to His Majesty, I'll leave it to you." The officer liked Huyen Yichen. After all, Huyen Yichen had taken the official route and didn't go above the punishment office when he could have gone to His Majesty directly. Chapter 3842, Investigate 2. However, something happened at home as soon as the officer went back and finished writing the memorial to the throne. Someone came to see him. He narrowed his eyes when he saw the person. The visitor was Princess Rao's daily servant. "Sir, have we met before?" Saixia asked and glanced at him. The office head was a third-ranked official and one of the 3 chiefs of the judicial department. However, to Saixia he was only an average official because her master was going to be the future king. Seeing Saixia, the office head sighed inwardly. Some things were bound to happen. "Sir, since you've recognized me, there's no need to beat around the bush. Let's get straight to the point." Saixia looked at the office head. The office head was so angry that he laughed. Because of what had happened to Huyen Yichen, he had gone to see the eldest prince, who had been so mild and humble toward him. However, Princess Rao's maid was acting so arrogantly in front of him now. How interesting. The office head sat in a chair with a cold look in his eyes. Saixia frowned a little. Was he going to disrespect the princess? At that thought, she slowly walked up to the office head and stared at him. "Sir, what are you laughing at?" The office head didn't say anything and only stared at her. Saixia cleared her throat. "If I'm guessing correctly, you're investigating the incident in Huyen Yichen's family, aren't you?" The office head didn't reply. Saixia stared at him. "My princess has something to say about this case." "Really?" The office head smiled at her. "I wonder what Princess Rao has to say." Saixia looked into his eyes and said in a warning tone, "My princess wants you to drop the case if you can. You're a busy man. Don't tire yourself out." The office head was so angry that he laughed. "Princess Rao wants to do whatever she wants? How arrogant. Do you have a different opinion?" Saixia frowned and was surprised because when the princess told her to come, she told her to just tell the old man to shut up. If Saixia repeated those words, the office head would be furious. But the fact was that Princess Rao was still furious over the death of 7 spiritual overlords. She had come up with several plans to catch Huyen Yichen and the others all at once. The office head nodded. "Your princess can speak for herself if she has something to say." After that, he waved her off with a stern look on his face. "This isn't a place for a maid like you. Leave now." Saixia was dumbfounded. The officials had always been very polite to Princess Rao, for not only was His Majesty behind her, but the patriarch was as well. At the thought of the omnipotent patriarch, Saixia smirked. "So, I advise you to think it through." The office head waved his hand impatiently. "Get lost." Saixia gritted her teeth and threatened him. "Fine. If that's the case, don't blame us for what our princess will do. Don't come to us for help when the time comes." She turned to leave after that. She had thought that the office head would stop her, but he didn't. Instead, he smirked. "Terrific." Saixia left in a huff. A figure entered the study after she left. Chapter 3843, Investigate 3. Just then, the wife of the office head entered the room. "My lord, that's Princess Rao's personal maid. Are you sure you can do this?" His wife gritted her teeth. The office head sighed. The eldest prince and Princess Rao are involved, and the competition for the throne isn't something to be taken lightly. We'll stay out of it and remain neutral. We'll only support His Majesty. His wife said, if Princess Rao takes her revenge. The office head smiled bitterly. She'll have to wait until she becomes the emperor. His wife said, apart from His Majesty, she also has the patriarch. Isn't she the only one the patriarch likes? Even His Majesty is on her side. The office head shook his head. If she really is that kind of person, Northern Yen will have a darkest moment when she becomes the king. No, I won't allow. His wife smiled bitterly. She hoped it wouldn't come to that. After Tsaixia went back, she told Princess Rao about the office head's reaction. Princess Rao narrowed her eyes. Is that really his reaction? Tsaixia lowered her gaze and said respectfully, I've been very polite, but he wouldn't drop the case no matter what. He even said that the memorial to the throne had been sent to the palace. According to the rules of the Northern Yen Kingdom, the memorial to the throne would be sent to the royal palace on the same day for His Majesty to see. The following morning, His Majesty would take it out for discussion. If the officials heard about it, Princess Rao was both angry and troubled. She was furious because she had lost so many capable cultivators. She only had so many spiritual overlords left. She had to be out of her mind to send so many of them, but she had no idea that the eldest prince's men would suddenly show up. She then recalled the arm of discipline, which had brought her to think about the ugly girl. Ever since she ran into that girl, she knew that she was going to be in trouble. It just didn't feel right. Kill her, Princess Rao said angrily. Tsaixia was confused, but when she saw the murderous look in Princess Rao's eyes, she realized something. The ugly girl who lives in Petty Shop? Your Highness, we sent so many capable cultivators, but they still couldn't kill her. Now, plus, could it be the eldest prince's plan? Has he gotten wind of it already? Will he still have people guarding there? Tsaixia asked more questions. Princess Rao was furious. Fine. Have someone keep an eye on her. Kill her as soon as she's alone. Princess Rao gritted her teeth. And make sure you get that arm. Her 18th birthday was coming up, and according to the patriarch, if everything went as planned, she would get that pill at her 18th birthday banquet. That way, she would be able to make great achievements in her cultivation and become the ruler of the kingdom. After all the medicine she had taken, all the supplementary cultivation techniques she had practiced, and all the hard work she had put in since she was little, she had to have that pill. Seeing the look on Princess Rao's face, Tsaixia didn't dare to say anything and only nodded. And send someone to stop the carriage from entering the palace. Stop the memorial to the throne before it reaches the king. Princess Rao wanted to stall. All she needed to do was to keep it a secret until after her birthday party. As long as she could get that primary heaven pill, the eldest prince would be nothing. Who else could compete with her for the throne? At that thought, Princess Rao looked pleased. Chapter 3844. Investigate 4. It was true that she hadn't done anything all these years, but she had been fawning on the patriarch, and that was the right thing to do. Princess Rao was very pleased with herself for fawning over the patriarch. She smirked inwardly when she saw Tsaixia leave. It would be great if she could stop the memorial to the throne, but if she couldn't do it in time. Princess Rao's eyes glinted coldly. She had to get started. Come out, she said coldly. A gray figure appeared in front of her. Lowering her voice, Princess Rao gave him instructions on what to do, and the person quickly left after receiving the order. Before long, Tsaixia came back, looking displeased. Your Royal Highness, with a long face, Tsaixia told Princess Rao that the people she sent couldn't stop the memorial. Tsaixia had thought that Princess Rao would vent her anger on her and that she would end up like Feiyu. However, Princess Rao only waved her off and left her with some other instructions. Back at the shop, Huyen Yichen ran up to Feng Wu happily and said excitedly, Feng, I've done everything you asked of me. What's next? What shall we do next? Feng Wu wasn't alone. The eldest prince was with her as well. Right now, the eldest prince was looking at Huyen Yichen with an aggrieved look in his eyes. He was sitting there, but Huyen Yichen ignored him and was only talking to the girl. Feng Wu was forging a weapon at the moment. After the arm of discipline, Feng Wu decided to make something else. Feng Wu had planned to build herself a divine-level armor if she had more divine iron. Although the soft armor Jun Linyuan gave her earlier was very useful, it could protect her from both front and back. But she was short of divine iron, so she could only make some gadgets that would be useful soon. Seeing that Huyen Yichen was running happily toward her, Feng Wu glanced at him and didn't give him another look, for she couldn't afford to be distracted. Huyen Yichen wanted to say something, but the eldest prince gave him a warning glance. Huyen Yichen said, "Your Royal Highness, there you are." The prince was so angry that he almost laughed. Why was it so hard to see a living person like him? After that, Huyen Yichen just stood there and watched Feng Wu work. He didn't ask any more questions. The crown prince rolled his eyes at him. "Aren't you going to ask what happened after the incident last night?" Huyen Yichen cried out, "You know?" That was hilarious. As the eldest prince and one of the heirs to the throne, he had a lot of connections. If he didn't know, who did? That girl? Crossing his hands behind his back, the crown prince snorted and waited for Huyen Yichen to ask the question. But Huyen Yichen didn't say anything. The eldest prince took a deep breath and calmed himself down. 15 minutes later, Feng Wu was finally done with her work. Huyen Yichen asked curiously, "What are you making?" "It looks like a mosquito." Feng Wu nodded. "Does it look like a real mosquito?" Huyen Yichen looked at it and nodded. "It does look like it. What does it do? Can it explode? Is it an offensive secret weapon?" Feng Wu said grumpily, "No. It's a detection device." Before Huyen Yichen could react, the prince's eyes lit up and he forgot about his little tantrum. Chapter 3845. New Invention 1. The prince's eyes lit up. He quickly walked up to Feng Wu and stared at the inky black mosquito in Feng Wu's hand. He looked at Feng Wu in excitement and reached out. Feng Wu knew that the prince was her business partner these days, and she would have to depend on him if she wanted to meet the patriarch. At that thought, Feng Wu put the mosquito in the prince's hand. The prince held the mosquito with both hands and examined it closely. Huyen Yichen rolled his eyes at him. "What's there to see? It's just a toy." The prince looked at Feng Wu in bewilderment as well. "Is this mosquito used for detection? Can it fly?" Feng Wu nodded. No one knew how she did it, but the little thing the size of a black bean slowly rose from the prince's hand like a real mosquito. It flapped its wings and flew in the air. "That's true." The prince stared at the mosquito and heaved a long sigh. He then turned to Feng Wu. "Did you say this is a detector? How is it going to do that?" Feng Wu suddenly smiled and asked Huyen Yichen, "Do you want to know what your grandfather is doing?" Huyen Yichen said, "Isn't my grandpa sleeping in his room?" Feng Wu smiled. She then took out a white jade from her chest pocket and drew an inscription on it. The next moment, the mosquito flapped its wings and slowly flew toward old Huyen's room. It wasn't moving very fast and looked like a real mosquito. Soon, the mosquito stopped outside the room. Because the door was closed. Huyen Yichen laughed. "Look, your mosquito is so stupid. It flew around the door and was dumbfounded. After all the effort you've put in, what good can it do? It's useless." However, Huyen Yichen was soon proven wrong. When the mosquito found a corner where it couldn't see clearly, it stuck its head forward and made a small hole. The rice-sized mosquito then flapped its wings and flew into old Huyen's room. Huyen Yichen's mouth fell open, and he stared at Feng Wu. Is that even possible?" Feng Wu nodded. "Why not?" But, it's a fake mosquito. How could it be so smart? It could poke holes with its antennae and choose a blind spot in the corner? That was incredible." Feng Wu smiled. "It's only like this because it's a fake mosquito." Meanwhile, the fake mosquito was hovering over old Huyen's head. Old Huyen wasn't asleep. He was sitting at his desk with a pen in his hand. He was writing something, and there were piles of paper scattered all over the floor. Feng Wu glanced at Huyan Yichen and commented, "Your grandfather's handwriting really isn't that good." Huh? Huyan Yichen looked at Feng Wu in bewilderment. My grandpa's handwriting? Wait, how do you know how good my grandpa's handwriting is? You've never seen it before. The next moment, Feng Wu unfolded the white jade. There was a clear image on the white jade. In the image, old man Huyan was sitting at his desk, holding a pen in one hand and scratching his ear with the other. He looked like a hopeless student. Huyan Yichen cried out. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.